threatened to launch nuclear weapons first as a way of settling a crisis. The few who considered adopting a no first use policy in the end decided against it. There are rationales for these doctrines, drills, and exercises, and for the retention of the first use option. They are driven by policies, personalities, and bureaucratic rivalries, but also by a logic which, once its premises are accepted, hurls its adherents and the rest of us into a rabbit hole of increasingly bizarre scenarios that seem increasingly, if strangely, rational the deeper they're probed. Understanding the nuclear era, the era of our lifetime, means understanding the rabbit hole, who dug it, and how we got stuck inside. It means tracing the maze of its tunnels, which is to say the arc of its history. A story enmeshed in secrecy, some of it still secret, much of it now illuminated by declassified documents and interviews with key actors, though never fully told. How did we get to this second coming of nuclear panic? How did we wind up with thousands of nuclear weapons, far more than any war aims could justify? What propelled the nuclear arms race during the decades-long Cold War? And what happened to the weapons and their guardians after the Cold War ended? And how and why did any of this persist? This is the Thom Hartmann Book Club, the book Fred Kaplan's The Bomb. We have a new video up over at thomhartmann.com for people who are regular supporters of our program, and the essence of it is, you know, I use a couple of examples. There's hundreds of them out there. In one case, Alabama is preparing to execute a man who was not guilty of the crime that he committed with a relatively high level of certainty, but still they're gonna kill this guy, you know, an African American. And the other story out of New York State, where the police officers hogtied this guy, arms, elbows behind him, tied his legs together, and then threw him down a flight of stairs, mangled his face. He looked just, he was totally beaten. 12 hours later, he commits suicide in his cell. How is it possible that our prisons do this kind of stuff? Because the 13th Amendment says that slavery is still legal in the United States. You have no rights if you've been convicted of a crime. We need to amend the Constitution. Check it out at thomhartmann.com. For Gold, The Edge of Anarchy by Jack Kelly.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Well, happy Thursday. Sean calls it Conspiracy Theory Thursday. I'm not quite ready to go there. Congressman Mark Pocan was going to be with us for the first hour of our program today, but the Senate bill, or the bill that passed the Senate, I guess it was the night before last, late in the day or early this morning, whatever. In any case, that bill is going to the House for a vote presumably tomorrow is what I had been reading, but apparently there's a whole lot of activity going on in the House this morning. Congressman Pocan is on a couple of the committees that are having to mark the bill up and check it out, and so he's just like buried in work right now, and so not available to us. He may call in briefly at some point to just give us an update on what his thinking is on what's going on right now, but he might not too. And he may or may not drop by tomorrow. So we'll see. I mean, it's kind of a crazy time. Kind of. It is a crazy time. So, we'll just hang in there. The tip of the iceberg. This I find fascinating. The National Employment Law Project, their director, Rebecca Dixon, points out that the 3.4 million, 3.28 million, I guess is the exact number, 3.28 million jobless claims that were just laid down, that's just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, metaphorically speaking, that is not all the people who have lost their work because of this. Because the unemployment numbers don't include people who are, quote, self-employed. So you've got, presumably hundreds of thousands, perhaps even millions of Uber drivers, for example, and Lyft drivers, and and contract pizza delivery people and home cleaners, house cleaners, and I mean, just fill in the blank. All these folks who have, dog walking services and babysitting services and little home daycare centers and, all these things that people set up is essentially their own little businesses. And you have all of this stuff going on, and none of it is being captured in the official unemployment numbers. The official unemployment numbers only show people who filed for unemployment. And if you're a self-employed, if you're an Uber driver, you can't file for unemployment. You don't have an employer. And if you're cleaning houses, particularly if you're doing it for cash, you can't file unemployment. If you're an undocumented immigrant who's been working in anything from construction to lawn maintenance to many domestic services, to agriculture, to being a physician. I mean, it doesn't matter if you're not here legally, you can't file unemployment, and that's millions of people in our workforce. So street vendors, domestic workers, all of these things, they're simply not being measured. So, we say we've got 3.28 million unemployed people. It's probably closer to 5. And by the way, that 3.28 million is massively larger than the biggest drops. The people forget the 1980s. 1982, when Reagan first did his massive tax cuts, it caused the biggest drop in the history of the stock market. Excuse me, it caused a recession, which caused the biggest increase in unemployment in '82 since the Great Depression. It was just a massive increase in unemployment. So this beat that. And then, of course, in '87, you had the biggest drop. This was after Reagan did another tax cut. And in '87, you had that was his biggest tax cut, actually, in '86, '87. You had the biggest stock market crash in the history, except for 1929. Well, we've beat that too. We beat '87. So it looks like we're trending into Republican Great Depression, 1929 Republican Great Depression territory, and that's not a good thing at all. So this $2 trillion, as I said to Congressman Pocan last week, I believe that it's going to take $10 trillion to get us out of this at a minimum. And we've already spent $3 trillion, assuming that the Senate legislation passes the House tomorrow and doesn't have to go back to conference. And it's just, Nancy Pelosi is putting together another $2 trillion worth of stimulus, although Mitch McConnell is threatening to have the Senate go home for a month to block her from doing that. But, we'll see. Meanwhile, the average time it takes to get a test result back, Quest Diagnostics and LabCorp, the two biggest companies that the Trump administration actually gave, over $1 million in cash to ramp up their testing once Trump figured out that he actually needed some testing in March. These companies could have been brought online in January or February, but no, Trump had to tell us, oh, it's all good, don't worry, I've got it under control. So these companies are saying, it's going to take 5, 6, 7 days to get your test results back. So, just chill out. I mean, and then it gets even weirder. Donald Trump spent most of his life, or much of his life, as far as we can tell, hanging out with mobsters and people associated with the mob. The most obvious was Roy Cohn, a guy who was his lawyer until he died. And Roy Cohn was also a lawyer for the biggest mobster in New York City. Roy Cohn was a mobbed-up lawyer, and he was Donald Trump's lawyer. And Donald Trump was in the construction business and the real estate business, two businesses that have been heavily infiltrated by the mob back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, particularly in the years when Donald Trump was doing business. And now Trump's mobster tendencies are on display for all of us to see. There's this Democratic super PAC. It's called Priorities USA. And Priorities USA has put out an ad that simply, it shows Trump making a series of proclamations, and it gives the date up in the corner. And then superimposed on this is a chart of the growing coronavirus diagnoses. And, you say, oh, Trump's saying, oh, it's nothing, and I don't want the cruise ship to get in there and it'll screw up the numbers. And, everything's good and we've got this under control. And as he's saying these lies, you're watching the coronavirus numbers go up. It's 100% of the ad is Trump's own words. So Trump's lawyers have sent a letter now to the television networks that are carrying this ad that's funded by Priorities USA, the super PAC. They have sent a cease and desist letter to the TV stations saying that because the clips were taken out of context, they're not showing the entire hour-long speech. They're just showing, or a rally or whatever it may have been. They're just showing little clips. That therefore this is deceptive advertising. Now this is the same campaign, the Trump campaign, that according to Judd Legum over at popular.info has over 1,000 ads running on Facebook that CNN refused to carry because they contain lies. So lies on Facebook for Trump, just fine. Truth on television stations against Trump? Oh no, we're going to have the FCC, which answers to Donald Trump, pull your license. Now, this is going to be real interesting over the next 24 hours to see if these TV stations start backing down. I'm guessing that the ones that are like Sinclair stations, will gladly back down. They'll say, oh yeah, okay, no problem. We'll stop doing that. We don't, But, this is crazy. I mean, we're watching in real time what happens when a failed businessman who wanted to be a mobster, grew up admiring mobsters and mobster lawyers like Roy Cohn. We're watching in real time what happens when somebody like that becomes president of the United States. I mean, this is a tragedy, for lack of a better word. It's just an absolute screaming tragedy. Literally, people are dying because Donald Trump fiddled while the United States was, while this epidemic was burning through the United States. And coming up soon are going to be, Mississippi, Louisiana, and Florida. They're going to be melting down, and they've all got Republican governors who are all like, oh, I don't know. We'll be back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
I'll pick up your phone calls as well in just a moment. And, of course, there's more news of the day to share with you. Stick around. On B. Congressman Pocan.
I'm so sorry about what we've been doing to you the last couple of days, but it's
oh no, it's all good. You're on the air, by the way. We're on the air right now.
Good. Yeah, I've had 7.5 hours of conference calls yesterday alone, and today I think I'm hitting that record as well. Yeah.
It's I can well understand. So you want to tell us what's going on? Give us an update.
Yeah, well, the Senate, passed the giant aid package last night unanimously after having to really fight hard to make sure that we could keep benefits for people on unemployment insurance in a stronger way to make sure that people are able to endure the next not just few weeks but few months, Tom. And we've got that in place for 4 months, that extra money. It now goes to the House tomorrow at 9 a.m. We anticipate that it will be a voice vote. That's what's been agreed to by leadership, but any member could object and ask for a recorded vote. So many of us right now
does a voice vote mean that you can do it remotely? You can basically call in, or does that mean that you still have to be there, you just yell?
No, we don't have to be there, because right now the House is not there. Only the Senate is, because we finished our portion of the package. Mitch McConnell took that weekend off. They came back to work, put this together. But honestly, for many of us, we're in states like Wisconsin with essentially our order is safer at home, but it's a shelter-in-place order that's across the country in many places. Having us there just to record the vote, if they have the ability to do a voice vote, would probably be better. And we know there's going to be a fourth package and maybe more, and we're trying to do anything that we can to fix things in the next packages. But the important part is this will do a lot to help small businesses. It does some to help big businesses. It does some work to help local and state governments. It's going to get more dollars for healthcare out there. It's going to support more benefits through the unemployment insurance. It's going to get a check out to every American. It's got a lot of things in there, and right now that's kind of what we're unbundling, all the different aspects. We first got final language late last night.
Yeah, amazing. And so you're just starting to see this legislation.
Yeah, what happened yesterday, we had at least 6 hours, maybe it was 5 hours or 6 of just, I think it's 5 hours, I take it back, just on what we thought was in the bill, but it was all without text. So we were doing with what we thought was in there, because the House had its version of a bill, and then we knew where we weren't winning and where we were winning, and then we kind of went over that in every by sections for about 5 hours yesterday, but we didn't have definitive final language yet. So now we finally have that as of last night. The Senate literally voted on it with seeing it for a relatively short period of time. Our leadership said they'd do 24 hours. So now we have a call this afternoon with the entire caucus. We have a Progressive Caucus call this afternoon to go over it. The Progressive Caucus Center, which is a 501c3 organization, did a great analysis, and that's what we're working through right now to try to fully understand what's in the bill. And but we anticipate right now it'll be a vote tomorrow morning, ideally a voice vote. But a lot of us got to figure how we're flying there otherwise. So.
Right. Are you with us for the rest of the hour, sir?
No, I'm with you for probably another 10 minutes until there's one call. If it comes, Tom, I have to drop you because it's unbelievably important.
Okay.
Other than that,
Okay.
I'll stay on for at least another 10.
Okay, great. Thank you. We'll be right back with Congressman Mark Pocan. Stick around. Our 1 hour free podcast recaps our show, and it's available wherever fine podcasts are found. And we have the full 3 hour podcast available over at thomhartmann.com if you want to really support our program. So nuclear power is being sold as the thing that's going to save us from climate change. It's not. Not only does it take mind-boggling amounts of carbon to even build a nuclear power plant, all that concrete, all that steel, all that stuff that has to be hauled in and transported, and then you got to mine the uranium, and then you got to ship it and all this kind of stuff. But now the industry is out with their hand out. 20 years ago, we subsidized the industry to the tune of $100 billion, and that's not the unquantifiable amount from the Price-Anderson Act, where we insure nuclear power plants as well. These are just subsidies, and now we've got a whole set of brand new subsidies that companies in New York and Ohio and Pennsylvania and New Jersey are coming to the ratepayers. It's mind-boggling. We've got a whole video about it, that lays out all the details for our supporters over at thomhartmann.com, and you can get over there and check it out. It's pretty amazing stuff, and nuclear power. No panacea. In fact, it's a big problem. Check it out at thomhartmann.com. Thank you. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Congressman Mark Pocan just called in, and he's only going to be with us for a few minutes here. We've got I think about 8 or 9 minutes left in this half hour. Congressman, I know when we were talking just a moment ago, you gave me a quick recap of what's going on, but do you mind repeating that for our commercial station listeners?
No, I'd be very glad to. So tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., the House will be voting on the bill. We are having a number of calls this afternoon with the full caucus, with the Progressive Caucus, to go over what's in it. Yesterday, I think I said we had 5 or 6 hours of calls breaking it out the best we could, but we didn't have language till last night. So really a lot of it was still talking about what we might need to put in a fourth package, and there will be a fourth package. We are quite certain. This package, though, does provide, it's about $2 trillion package. It does provide $1,200 checks to Americans making less than $75,000 a year. It does provide $600 a week extra in unemployment each week for the next 4 months to cover 100% of lost wages. It is, for many people, 100% of lost wages. It'll provide local and state governments more money to do what they're doing during the health crisis. It has money in rescue funds to hospitals to keep operating and providing care to patients. There is a significant portion, about $400 to $500 billion, that's going to be going to some affected industries. that while there are some conditions around things like you can't use it for stock buybacks, et cetera, we would have liked to have had stronger and more permanent. But we did have a significant win on getting additional money for people on unemployment. That was very important to the Democrats. There's a whole lot more in there, as you can imagine, a $2 trillion bill. There's going to be some things that, unfortunately, we'll probably find out a little later that aren't good. But we are doing our very best to break it down now. And we anticipate, again, a vote tomorrow morning in the House, a voice vote. If someone objects, a lot of us are going to have to find a flight to come in to officially vote, even though many of us live in areas where we're not supposed to be traveling right now. But we'll figure it all out. We're learning as it goes.
Right. Any chance that Congress is going to change the rules to make it possible that you guys could change your own rules so that you can vote remotely from home? And I'm curious your response to New York Governor Cuomo, who this morning called this bill a huge disappointment, or words to that effect, because New York State is only getting $3-point-something billion out of it.
Yeah, I mean, as a hotspot, he's clearly, going to have concern, but it's not going to be a disappointment to every American across across the country who is going to be laid off or is laid off and is going to get some extra assistance. Right. That is vital to keeping the economy going and to keeping those families afloat, because we wanted to make sure that would happen. So there's a significant amount of good. There's a significant amount of bad. I guess that's what you get whenever you have a split legislature and a Republican president. But I do think that the good is pretty significant in here. And again, we're still dissecting through all aspects of this bill. On the voting question, Tom, Jim McGovern from Massachusetts was assigned to kind of figure this out. We have this voice vote agreement on this package, but for the next few weeks, though, still people should not be traveling. The best thing that possible is have people stay at home to make sure that the spread of this doesn't occur. So we're looking at other options. In fact, we right now are whipping a question to Progressive Caucus members with an idea around video voting to see how that might work. So I think it's still a conversation that's being had.
The unemployment figures came out this morning, and you've got roughly 3 million people who filed for unemployment. But that doesn't include people who run their own home cleaning business, or Uber drivers, people who are independent contractors, people who work for themselves, people in the gig economy, people who are undocumented workers, people who've been working for cash. It doesn't cover any of them. I mean, it could be that the actual unemployment numbers are 2 or 3 times larger than what we're seeing because of the outsized impact in the economy of those kinds of people and those kinds of jobs. Does this bill do anything to catch these people as they fall?
Yes, it does have a number of ways to catch folks, both on the $1,200 check and on the unemployment insurance. I don't want to say 100%, but I'm saying this about 90%, that people who are sole proprietors and others in categories where they may not have employees will be able to access unemployment insurance under this. It's a separate fund, I believe, actually. So but we'll get to the specifics on this, but there is a way to make sure that they're not left behind. I would argue, though, that I still think there are some deficiencies on the small business side. You and I are both lifelong small business people, Tom. I think one of the aspects that's missing is there's a work share proposal that could help you ramp employees back up into work that needs to be improved. And right now, there's some problems. It's only in 27 states. So we're working on that. And we're hoping in the next package that we might be able to get some improvement on that. But I do think small businesses could use more help than they're getting.
Yeah. And Congressman, you got a boogie now, right? You've got a phone call coming up?
You know what? I will stay on until the call, but when the call comes, I'll have to drop immediately, if that's all right, Tom.
Sure, it's up to you. Well, whatever you'd like.
We've
got a 6-minute break here.
I'm a doctor I got to take, so but I'll stay on.
Okay, we'll try to pick it up on the other side. We'll try to pick it up on the other side. Stick around. Thank you. And if you're not here, that's fine.
To the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
If you have to bail out, sir, just hang up and I'll notice that you've gone. But Congressman Mark Pocan,
no worries,
hopefully will be with us in just a second. Thank you, Congressman. Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is The Black Panthers, Portraits from an Unfinished Revolution, edited by Bryasha and Yohuro Williams. This is from Chapter 1, In Defense of Self-Defense, Pathways to the Black Panther Party. People joined the Black Panther Party for many different reasons. The moment of politicization was different for everyone, but a few were commonly shared, including the 1963 bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham, Alabama, and the 1965 Watts Urban Rebellion. A more general sense of frustration and alienation compelled others to join the Panthers' ranks. The party exerted an enormous pull on the imagination of the members, especially those who had experienced police brutality. In the rebellious spirit of the times, the party's bold stance on self-defense resonated with those seeking fresh alternatives for achieving social justice and black liberation. Party members expressed a deep appreciation for other aspects of the Panthers program, including its community service programs, which grew out of a genuine love for the people. My neighborhood friend, a sister that I've known since I was about 11 years old, said, "Claudia, I want you to go with me. We're going to go and hear these Panthers speak at PS 92, which was an elementary school in our community." I said, "Okay, I'll go, I'm down." I listened to these brothers speak and I heard the pitch. I saw the determination and I saw the compassion. I thought, wow, this is the feeling that I used to get when I went into clubs and popped my fingers and got on the dance floor. It was the same feeling, except it was bigger for me now. It was bigger than me. It was full of love of the people. No longer did we have to argue and fight about, what are you looking at me like that for? Or don't step on my sneaker, or this is my block. Now we really had something to fight for. We had a people to fight for. This is bigger than any gang or club. We had a goal. We had something to look forward to, which was the betterment of black people. It was most definitely something that I was searching for, but I didn't yet know what that I was searching. I didn't find it. It fell on me. That was the first meeting. That's what actually started the wheels in my mind for me to become political. I was rank and file. I did a lot of things. The easiest way to say it is just to imagine worker bees. You got one queen, everyone else works. Rank and file. Those were the worker bees. We did it all. The one thing I enjoyed the most was teaching the political education classes on 7th Avenue in front of the Harlem office. That was the most fruitful. But anything I did, it was for the love of the people. Wherever I was sent, or whatever I had to do, it didn't matter anymore because it was for the love of the people. We were trying to get the word out. If I had to sell 125 papers in a day and I got close to that goal, then I did a good job. I was originally from Queens and came out of the Corona branch of the Black Panther Party. When the Panther 21 were arrested and went to jail, in order to keep those offices open and functioning, Panthers were sent all over the city to Harlem. I was one of the Panthers that ended up in the Harlem branch. That's how I got to be there on Wednesday nights to give the PE classes, the political education classes. I was extremely nervous the first time, but once I found my voice, then it went like clockwork. A lot of the people in the community who were just walking by were like, well, let me stop and see what this little girl is talking about, because I was indeed a little girl at that time. We started off every PE class with a 10-point program, and we ended every PE class with, okay, let me hear from you guys. What do you want to see different in your community, and how are you living? Then we would get the feedback, and then we would know how to concentrate our efforts. Rent strikes were crazy, because if you had to live like that, why should you pay rent? We did clothing drives, we did food drives, we did, of course, the breakfast program. There were a lot of other things that happened, and they might have been more meaningful, but those PE classes stayed with me. We were outside on the street in front of the office. When you were giving a class or you were having a talk inside the office and there were only Panthers around you, the feeling was just different than outside on the street. The Panthers knew what you were doing because they were Panthers and they were doing the same thing. Outside, there were constant questions and answers with the people. You had to give yourself up when you were outside in that crowd. You never knew who was going to say, we don't care about that, we don't care about you, you need to go away. There were a lot of people that just did not know where we were coming from and were afraid that if they were seen in the office or if they were seen asking questions, that they'd get reprisals, that they'd end up getting hurt. They were afraid. Things went so fast. Time seems to accelerate when you're always looking over your shoulder. At this time, it was all-out war against the Panthers, and brothers are being shot down in the street or set up or going to jail for years. We have brothers in jail since that time, 40, 41 years. We've had brothers that we've lost on the inside that we can't let the world forget. The government said, okay, we're going to lock them up and throw away the key and no one will ever care. But it's not true. We want them out. We want freedom for all political prisoners. We don't want any more of them to die on the inside. That's the biggest injustice. There were times when our cadre consisted of almost nothing but women, and that was when the brothers were locked up or had to go underground. I remember being on a front line against a policeman on horseback and being 6 months pregnant. What we wanted was a simple street light, and we got the community out there and we blocked traffic. I didn't know whether I was going to be trampled, my baby killed, but I knew I had to be there. I was an active member of the party from 1968 to 1971, and in those few years, I aged 10, 15 years. We didn't have much time to be little girls. We went straight to womanhood. Talking about these things is bringing up all of these feelings, though I hadn't thought about or touched on them for a long time. It seems that as you get older and you look back on the things that you've done in your life, you say, oh my God, I could have gotten killed then. When you're young, fear is not really in your vocabulary, and once you look back, you wonder, why wasn't I afraid? We didn't have much time to be afraid. It was all about survival. The Black Panthers. The 21st Century drops by to explain what is the Extinction Rebellion and what do they do. Check it out wherever you find great podcasts. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Congressman Mark Pocan, are you still with us, sir?
Yes, I am.
Oh, cool. Okay, and you're gonna bail out when your phone call comes in that you got to run and take, right?
Exactly. I'll say if I can, okay. And that's the only thing that'll stop me.
So the Courier-Journal is a newspaper in Kentucky. I'm not sure exactly where, but they're reporting that Kentucky Congressman Thomas Massie, Republican, says that not only does he plan to vote no on the coronavirus relief package, but that he also may be the vote who opposes a voice vote in the House. What would that mean? And also, you know, I've got a whole bunch of callers on the line. Do you want to take calls from our listeners here, or did you want to just talk through what's going on? I'm not sure how.
No, I'm glad to take calls. I think what I won't be able to probably answer are specifics about the bill, but I'll be glad to do anything I can via calls.
Okay, great. And your thoughts on what happens if Massie says no?
Yeah, I think that's what we're all trying to figure out. Many of us are texting and calling each other, trying to figure out what's happening. I mean, if it's a voice vote, to go there unless you want to give a speech or do what Thomas might want to do tomorrow. But if they have us come because it has to be a recorded vote, it's going to pass with at least 90% of the votes. The question is, the median age in Congress is 60, which is starting to put people in risk categories. And then there's people like myself who have cardiovascular disease, and we're told, you know, we're more at risk, should we get this, of dying. So many of us are calling our doctors right now, finding out, are we able to travel or not? And I'm guessing many of us won't be able to. So it'll pass no matter what happens. If Thomas does that, I don't know what point he'll make exactly, other than he'll potentially put a lot of people at risk. But let's hope that that doesn't happen, and let's hope that we figure out voting procedures for the next few weeks, because I think it's a bad sign. If we're able to travel for work, is that other people will come to Washington because there's members of Congress to lobby us, right? And then you're going to we're working against everything that we're told. Dr. Fauci repeatedly had recommended a several-week lockdown a while back, when a several-week lockdown would have worked. Now we're more at month requests of having people stay at home, and those could be extended. But what we've got to do is stop the spread of the virus, and I think anything that sends a different message really works against the public health outcomes we're trying to have.
All right, getting on an airplane is not going to be something that sets that.
Getting on an airplane, going to a hot zone, encouraging lobbyists to come out and other people to come out. I mean, that's what's going to happen. Suddenly you're getting people out of their homes to be working. Staffs are going to have to do that. And we already have a number of staff people who have tested positive for the virus. And, it's going to be Uber drivers. It's going to be people's staff driving them. It's going to be a lot of other folks that are all at risk, too, as you add that kind of activity. So I just think you do have to weigh it. I mean, obviously, this is a huge package, and we have to have our say, and we have done everything we can to have the say, and there are some significant things in here. There will be another package where we can do other things or make corrections. But if it's only to, get your name on TV or get a few Twitter hits to bring everyone in to do what's going to happen anyway, I don't know if that serves the public well.
Yeah, amen. Tony in Boise, Idaho, you're on the air with Congressman Mark Pocan.
hello to both of you. I'm a musician that does Uber driving on the weekdays. So my work and gigs were all in Washington, Oregon, and California. So everything pretty much just got canceled right away. You know what I mean? So and there's a lot of musicians and that are Uber drivers also that are upside down, and we want to open up the country for business as soon as possible too. But I want it to happen in a responsible way, not like like the president is saying, do it right now and make a bad situation worse. Is there any way that Congress can block the president from trying to open everything up in an irresponsible way so that everything gets screwed up, and then us musicians and Uber drivers are stuck another maybe 2 years like this because the president didn't wait the time that the doctors recommend we wait?
Yeah, Tony, I couldn't agree with you more. There's a number of us who signed out a bill that Ro Khanna introduced. I think 20 of us did, and many, many more agreed with the sentiment who didn't sign on to the bill, which is if we had a nationwide shutdown right now of some period of time, we would get through this much quicker. Honestly, it should have all happened weeks and maybe months ago, both from the testing kit perspective and doing this to stop the spread of the virus, but it didn't. At least right now, many governors have done the responsible thing and local political leaders have done the right thing, and that's going to help to try to lessen it. But just doing this, like saying Easter is the magical moment that you can change this, doesn't follow science. So I'm hoping Dr. Fauci will keep being Dr. Fauci, keep trying to get his ear, because I think he understands that the way we do this is you have to completely lessen that curve to the point that you don't overburden the healthcare system, the hospitals, because that's when you're going to have the mass deaths, when you don't have enough ventilators for people because people were either irresponsible or decided this wasn't real. And I still get unbelievable amount of comments, Tony, on my social media from people who still act like this isn't real because for so many weeks the president and Fox News and others said that. Right now, the most important thing we can do is stay at home, especially if you're in one of those areas that needs to work from home and ride this out so we can all be able to get back to work much sooner in the future.
Kendall in Los Angeles, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Good morning. Yes, I'm calling because I live in California, and I just read a headline from a publication, LAIST.com, that said that Governor Gavin Newsom has announced that 4 banks, Wells Fargo, U.S. Bank, Citibank, and J.P. Morgan, have agreed to a 90-day waiver for residential mortgages, but that Bank of America has not. And I'm just wondering, is there anything that, mostly everyone that I know has their mortgage through Bank of America. And I'm just wondering, is there anything that can be done through the Congress to put pressure on Bank of America to extend that same 90-day waiver to all citizens? We're all suffering equally.
Yeah, Kendall, I have not seen that, so I can't comment directly to that. I can generally comment. I think if everyone but Bank of America is doing this, there will be incredible pressure just on Bank of America, period, to also do it. So I am hoping that will work. Right now, I know in the bill we do have some language around evictions and other things, I believe. And I've got to, again, it's a 1,200-page bill that we're trying to go through, and we've got a number of calls this afternoon to actually go through those final details on it. But specifically to the mortgage question, I think if everyone is doing it of the major providers and not Bank of America, there will be pressure on Bank of America to do it as well.
Mark in San Francisco, listening on AM 910. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Yeah, Congressman, my concern is Social Security and the funding of it. And I see that there's a provision that corporations don't have to pay into it till the end of the year, and it could be a trap by the Republicans to destroy it. I'm really concerned about Social Security.
Yeah, Mark, I don't think it's a trap. It was part of the negotiation that we would never have done, I think, as Democrats alone on it, but it was part of part of getting this additional money in people's hands, I think that we needed to do. But I don't think this is going to be something that's going to be permanent. I think it is. In fact, it's even specifically has a time date end, I believe, in the bill. But it does show, again, part of the fights that we have to get something that puts money into hands of people who right now are unemployed so they can buy groceries and pay their rent and continue to be able to pay for health care if they have it. We have to negotiate things that don't always make a lot of sense with the Republicans. This was something that they thought would save their employers some money for people who are employing people, but it should have a short-term net life to it, and I don't see it as a measure that's going to be something at all that's permanent that will affect Social Security.
David in San Francisco, we have a minute to a hard break here. David, you got a quick question for the congressman?
Well, yeah, it could be fairly quick. The idea of improving America's credit rating during this crisis should be built into the stimulus. So, for example, education programs so that people get college credit while they're in quarantine. That would improve America's credit rating because you end up with millions of smarter people who have a lot of directions to go. So I'm urging people, look line by line through that budget and find a way to do education and fund it. And fund it from Homeland Security. Those guys have got so much money in their couch that they could pay for it without a problem.
All right. Let's get the congressman's response here, David. Thank you.
Yeah, I think I would just say generally there are a lot of things that we wanted. We had a Democrat proposal that we made public. We didn't get everything. We think there'll be a fourth proposal. A couple things I think that we really need to do are more standards for healthcare workers so we know that they're not at risk. We need more measures for small business. And there'll be some other things, obviously, that we'll look at the list that we didn't get, and we'll continue to fight for and try to negotiate for.
Congressman Mark Pocan is with us. It's our slightly abbreviated version of Middays with Mark. Congressman Pocan is the co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. He also represents the 2nd District of Wisconsin. Pocan.house.gov, Pocan.house.gov is his website, and you can tweet him at Rep Mark Pocan. Congressman Pocan will be back with us in just a moment. It's 45 minutes past the hour. Picking up your calls. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
We'll be right back with more of your calls for Congressman Pocan, assuming he can stay with us in just a moment. And welcome back. Diana, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan. Diana in San Diego.
I think you may be.
Or Dana, excuse me. Dana. I misread. Sorry,
Diana.
On the air. Yeah,
Okay.
my error.
Yeah, I'm a male. Anyway, what I'm thinking is that we're going about this all the wrong way. What we're doing now is we're hiding from the virus. And what we should be doing is looking for it and containing it. In other words, when people call in and they say to a doctor, they say, well, I'm not feeling so good, rather than go through a few symptoms and tell them to stay at home, you just tell them, well, pick up your hotel key. And the people who feel that there's something wrong with them, we firstly put them in a hotel. And then we start sorting
Dana,
that
let's brilliant idea. Congressman Pocan, I think what Dana is basically saying is if anybody's feeling sick, let's quarantine them. That actually may not be as crazy as it sounds initially. What are your thoughts?
No, I mean, and I think that's kind of what we're doing, honestly. I can tell you in Wisconsin, I know of people who got a test last Tuesday and are still waiting for results today. This is 9 days later. So they're going to be hitting that 2-week period that you'd be waiting to find out if you have it, and then hopefully you'll know if they had it and they had mild symptoms or not. So, they're staying away from people. But if anyone has symptoms, they should just be doing their best to quarantine that they can. And not everyone's going to be able to afford to go somewhere else or do something else. And I don't know if we want them checking into hotels, but we do have to just watch out for everyone. So this is the reality. Now, other people who we know other people who've had like other symptoms like pneumonia who've gotten test results in 2 days, but people with conditions, who are in hot zones, are waiting, like I said, right now up to 9 days. And that's just means you've got to quarantine during that time period no matter what. You don't go to work even if it's an essential job if you are sick. That's why we extended the sick pay provision. So this is one where people just have to be smart, not selfish. Think of their grandmother or grandfather every time they're making a decision, because that's really what we are doing.
Yeah. Mark in Valley, Washington, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan. We have 1 minute, by the way. Mark?
Yeah, hi. Are you there?
Yeah, you're on the air. Yeah, you're on the air.
Yeah, good morning. I'm on Social Security disability, and I'm not really expecting to see a check. I'm worried that the president's going to stick me on that 6 months rotation of proving my disability. And, it takes 2.5 years to get in front of a magistrate. You could have disability for 6 months every 3 years under that program.
Congressman?
Yeah, I don't think I think we're going to be taking care of people in your situation as well, from what I understood. I can't tell you exactly. I know the check, I believe, will be something that you'll see. You're not on UI, so you may not see that increase, but I think there are some other initiatives for people in your place. I do not anticipate the president will do anything extra harsh right now, because I think this is one period where Democrats and Republicans, despite many of our differences, are trying to row together in many of these areas, and this is one that I think is pretty nonpartisan.
There you go. Congressman Mark Pocan taking your calls for the hour. It's our abbreviated version of Middays with Mark. We'll have the congressman with us until he gets a phone call he's got to take. We'll be right back. It is coming up on 10 minutes before the hour. Congressman Pocan's website, pocan.house.gov. You can tweet him at Rep. Mark Pocan. And he is the co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, represents the 2nd District of Wisconsin. We'll be right back. Hey, did you know that Hillary Clinton actually won Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, North Carolina, and Florida in the 2016 election? It's on page 92 of my new book, The Hidden History of the War on Voting. Hey, we just put up a new video for supporters of our program. You can find it over at thomhartmann.com. Talking about the relationship between Fox News, Rupert Murdoch, and basically the whole right-wing hate agenda on Hispanics, by and large, saying that Hispanics are changing our culture. Really? This is European culture. I mean, the Mayans and Aztecs got replaced by the Spaniards, remember? They're mostly Catholic. I don't see the cultural difference here, but Fox sure does. And also pointing out that Kevin Rudd, the former Prime Minister of Australia, calls out Rupert Murdoch and says, he's, quote, a cancer on Australian democracy. Well, apparently a cancer on American democracy as well. So you can check out this new video over at thomhartmann.com. It's just available to people who are, members of, supporters of our program. And welcome back. Congressman Mark Pocan is with us taking your calls. And Beverly in Wheeling, Illinois, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan. Beverly, you are on the air.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I know.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Yeah. I was wondering if people like restaurant workers who are laid off temporarily and after this is over can go back to work. I was wondering if they will be will be able to apply for unemployment.
Yeah, I'll tell you, that is, Beverly, one of the points I think that got missed in the bill. We had a better provision in the Democratic bill. There's something called work share under UI, and I have been a big proponent of doing a few tweaks to that program. That would allow a small business like a restaurant, because they're not going to go back to 100% capacity, to bring people on at maybe 25 or 50% capacity, and they can still qualify for unemployment insurance at a rate of like 50% if they're working 50%, and that allows them to get the extra money right now that we're going to need to, so that small business can eventually reopen and get them on at 100%, gets more money in their pockets, and it puts less of a burden on the UI system. So there is something that I'm working really, really hard on. 27 states have this, 23 don't. It does need to be streamlined a little more, because right now you can only reduce hours 60%, and I don't know if everyone can bring people back on at 40% right away. and you have to do it across the board. So we're trying to make some tweaks in it, but I think it's a smart way of trying to address this issue. And Rosa DeLauro and I are leading with a bill on the House on this. So I understand the issue. I'm a small business owner since I was 23 years old, and I want to make sure that the business is reopened so people have jobs when this is all over.
Marty in Chicago, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Okay, great. Thank you, Tom, for taking my call. And Congressman, my dad is currently in the hospital. He got admitted yesterday, and he tested positive for COVID-19. And he's in a high-risk category, including diabetes and all this other stuff. So they have him in isolation over there. But my mom and I are really freaking out. So what I guess we're asking is should we get tested being close, being in proximity to somebody who's sick? I mean, we're both asymptomatic, but it's kind of scary to think that we might actually be carrying this thing and not even know it. So is there any recommendation for family members to get tested once a family member has been tested positive? Thank you.
Yeah, Marty, I think it's going to depend on your unique area. I would say, one, ask your doctor that question. But at minimum, you should probably, because you've been exposed to someone who had COVID-19, you should probably be doing 14 days of self-isolation just to be safe. You don't want to spread it to someone else. You may turn out to be someone who's asymptomatic. You may not have it, but you don't know that. If the doctor can get you in to be tested, they'll make that determination. But like I said, in Wisconsin, in some cases right now, I know someone waiting 9 days for a result, you still would be in self-isolation. I think you just have to automatically assume that you're going to make sure you're not spreading it if you do have it, and you may not know it because you could be asymptomatic. But call your doctor and ask them, and they'll have the best advice.
Okay. David in Los Angeles, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Oh, good morning, gentlemen. Well, Congressman, I hear that furthers the disbursement of the funds, let's say the $1,200. I've heard reports that it would be at least around about 4 months before this money is massively distributed to the masses. But I'd like to ask the dear Congressperson, how will the $500 billion to corporate America, I think y'all already have the methodology by which you will disperse that money, right? And in addition to that, why is it and how do you come to the number that $500 billion go to corporate America and a fraction of that goes to the state and county and city and a fraction of that goes to the masses? How did y'all come up with these numbers?
Okay, Congressman, we have about a minute till the end of the hour.
Yeah, first of all, the majority is going to the masses right now in the bill. So that is stuff that we fought for, and it will not take 4 months. I don't know where you read that, but I would find new media sources. But it's not going to be quick. That wasn't our preferred way of doing it. We wanted to add it to the unemployment insurance and figure out some other ways to get money out to people, including people who may not currently be employed. So there is going to be a little bit of a curve to that, but it's nothing close to 4 months. As to the corporate, I can't tell you the delivery system of that right now. We just know right now that we have a panel to oversee decisions that are made so we can make sure that we've got some confidence in how that's happening. But I think this isn't a time to necessarily be, pointing the finger, I guess, a little bit. I mean, I don't like the way that we don't have extra provisions for this, but we do have provisions as long as the loans are in place. They can't do stock buybacks and other things. But I do know that the money will be almost immediately available via the UI system, and we need to get that money out right away for people who are currently unemployed.
Yeah. Okay. We should be hitting our break right now. Not sure why there we go. Okay. Congressman Pocan, thanks so much for dropping by. Please stay safe.
Yeah, thank you very much, Tom. You too, and we'll hopefully be here next week for you.
There you go. Thank you, Congressman. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
Hello, I'm Casey Hobbs.
And I'm Shane Mason, and we're the hosts of Nurse Talk Radio.
Here's what we're talking about this week. Here's a disturbing development. Shane, as you know, we have covered the progress of California's End-of-Life Option Act since before 2015 when Governor Jerry Brown signed it into law. It allows doctors to prescribe lethal drugs to patients with 6 months or less to live. Hundreds of Californians have already taken advantage of that option, including 111 individuals who died using the drugs in the first 7 months of their availability.
Proponents say it provides dignity to terminally ill patients by affording them more control over the end of their lives. Sadly, a few days ago, a Riverside County Superior Court judge granted a motion by opponents of the California End-of-Life Option Act to invalidate the law on a procedural technicality.
Unless the state successfully appeals the ruling in the next 5 days, eligible California residents will be prevented from utilizing medical aid in dying to peacefully end unbearable suffering.
Here with us to talk about the ruling is attorney Jonathan Patterson for Compassion.
But a few were commonly shared, including the 1963 bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham, Alabama, and the 1965 Watts Urban Rebellion. A more general sense of frustration and alienation compelled others to join the Panthers' ranks. The party exerted an enormous pull on the imagination of the members, especially those who had experienced police brutality. In the rebellious spirit of the times, the party's bold stance on self-defense resonated with those seeking fresh alternatives for achieving social justice and black liberation. Party members expressed a deep appreciation for other aspects of the Panthers program, including its community service programs, which grew out of a genuine love for the people. My neighborhood friend, a sister that I've known since I was about 11 years old, said, "Claudia, I want you to go with me. We're going to go and hear these Panthers speak at PS 92, which was an elementary school in our community." I said, "Okay, I'll go, I'm down." I listened to these brothers speak and I heard the pitch. I saw the determination and I saw the compassion. I thought, wow, this is the feeling that I used to get when I went into clubs and popped my fingers and got on the dance floor. It was the same feeling, except it was bigger for me now. It was bigger than me. It was full of love of the people. No longer did we have to argue and fight about, what are you looking at me like that for? Or don't step on my sneaker, or this is my block. Now we really had something to fight for. We had a people to fight for. This is bigger than any gang or club. We had a goal. We had something to look forward to, which was the betterment of black people. It was most definitely something that I was searching for, but I didn't yet know what that I was searching. I didn't find it. It fell on me. That was the first meeting. That's what actually started the wheels in my mind for me to become political. I was rank and file. I did a lot of things. The easiest way to say it is just to imagine worker bees. You got one queen, everyone else works. Rank and file. Those were the worker bees. We did it all. The one thing I enjoyed the most was teaching the political education classes on 7th Avenue in front of the Harlem office. That was the most fruitful. But anything I did, it was for the love of the people. Wherever I was sent, or whatever I had to do, it didn't matter anymore because it was for the love of the people. We were trying to get the word out. If I had to sell 125 papers in a day and I got close to that goal, then I did a good job. I was originally from Queens and came out of the Corona branch of the Black Panther Party. When the Panther 21 were arrested and went to jail, in order to keep those offices open and functioning, Panthers were sent all over the city to Harlem. I was one of the Panthers that ended up in the Harlem branch. That's how I got to be there on Wednesday nights to give the PE classes, the political education classes. I was extremely nervous the first time, but once I found my voice, then it went like clockwork. A lot of the people in the community who were just walking by were like, well, let me stop and see what this little girl is talking about, because I was indeed a little girl at that time. We started off every PE class with a 10-point program, and we ended every PE class with, okay, let me hear from you guys. What do you want to see different in your community, and how are you living? Then we would get the feedback, and then we would know how to concentrate our efforts. Rent strikes were crazy, because if you had to live like that, why should you pay rent? We did clothing drives, we did food drives, we did, of course, the breakfast program. There were a lot of other things that happened, and they might have been more meaningful, but those PE classes stayed with me. We were outside on the street in front of the office. When you were giving a class or you were having a talk inside the office and there were only Panthers around you, the feeling was just different than outside on the street. The Panthers knew what you were doing because they were Panthers and they were doing the same thing. Outside, there were constant questions and answers with the people. You had to give yourself up when you were outside in that crowd. You never knew who was going to say, we don't care about that, we don't care about you, you need to go away. There were a lot of people that just did not know where we were coming from and were afraid that if they were seen in the office or if they were seen asking questions, that they'd get reprisals, that they'd end up getting hurt. They were afraid. Things went so fast. Time seems to accelerate when you're always looking over your shoulder. At this time, it was all-out war against the Panthers, and brothers are being shot down in the street or set up or going to jail for years. We have brothers in jail since that time, 40, 41 years. We've had brothers that we've lost on the inside that we can't let the world forget. The government said, okay, we're going to lock them up and throw away the key and no one will ever care. But it's not true. We want them out. We want freedom for all political prisoners. We don't want any more of them to die on the inside. That's the biggest injustice. There were times when our cadre consisted of almost nothing but women, and that was when the brothers were locked up or had to go underground. I remember being on a front line against a policeman on horseback and being 6 months pregnant. What we wanted was a simple street light, and we got the community out there and we blocked traffic. I didn't know whether I was going to be trampled, my baby killed, but I knew I had to be there. I was an active member of the party from 1968 to 1971, and in those few years, I aged 10, 15 years. We didn't have much time to be little girls. We went straight to womanhood. Talking about these things is bringing up all of these feelings, though I hadn't thought about or touched on them for a long time. It seems that as you get older and you look back on the things that you've done in your life, you say, oh my God, I could have gotten killed then. When you're young, fear is not really in your vocabulary, and once you look back, you wonder, why wasn't I afraid? We didn't have much time to be afraid. It was all about survival. The Black Panthers.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. On the line with us is our buddy, Professor Richard Wolff. He is an economist. He's the co-founder of democracyatwork.info, the author of numerous books, his most recent, Understanding Socialism. In addition to democracyatwork.info, he also has a website at rdwolff with 2fs.com, and you can tweet him at Prof Wolff, Profwolff. Professor Wolff, welcome back.
Thank you, Tom. Glad to be here.
Thank you for joining us. I don't suppose I need to recap everything that's going on in Washington, D.C. right now. $2 trillion stimulus bill, half a trillion of that can be used by the Fed to loan up to $4 trillion out to American businesses, on top of the $1.5 trillion that's left in the bill. And then, I'm starting to recap it. Anyhow, I'm curious your thoughts on what's going on, where we're at, these unemployment numbers that we just saw, 2 million unemployed, when it looks like that doesn't even begin to capture things like Uber drivers and gig workers and whatnot. Where are we at? What's going on?
Well, I hesitate to give you the honest answer because I know you want it, and I'm going to do it. I just hesitate, almost like those programs on regular television that tell you you're about to see something scary or nude or something else like that. I can't bring you good news. I just can't. This bill is, for me, a spectacular disappointment. It's too little. It's too late. It does not recognize the systemic roots of this problem. It's going to throw more money, a lot more money, at the economy. It did not learn that didn't solve our problem back in 2008 and 9. It did not want to recognize that having thrown all that money and cut interest rates to next to nothing into the economy led this economic system to go on a binge of borrowing that the world has never seen before. We have been on the life support of a debt-ridden system on a scale nobody in my profession of economics could have imagined. And what we're doing now is, again, the same thing. Free money. Here, every business, come, borrow, get yourself through this disaster. We're not changing anything fundamental economically. We're not even learning the lessons of the obvious failure to plan properly to handle a virus pandemic, even though we've had a dozen of them in the last century, some of which were very deadly. I see a society, to be honest, sticking its head in the sand for fear of recognizing that this society needs fundamental economic changes. It has now for a long time, but we're about to go through yet another crisis, not learning the lesson, repeating the mistakes of the past, which set up the next crisis. It's very disheartening is the nicest way I can put it.
So if you were King, or if you were Steve Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary, or Jay Powell, the head of the Fed, what would you be doing?
Well, I can't resist. Mr. Mnuchin went around the country explaining that the economy was in great shape because the unemployment numbers were low. Lots of people pointed out the absurdity of that. Today, he's all over the newspapers having explained to everybody that the now high unemployment rate is, and I quote, irrelevant. It's marvelous. It takes your breath away. Okay, having said that, now to play King. All right, on the virus front, there has to be a government-coordinated plan, because nobody else can do it, in which private enterprises, if they are unwilling to produce the beds, the hospitals, the ventilators, the gowns, the test kits, you name it, then the government buys it for them. Either the private sector, driven by profit, or the government, recognizing that a profit system fails, has to accumulate stockpiles. They should have learned it from the pandemic of 1918, the Spanish flu. They didn't. They should have learned it from SARS, MERS, Ebola, and all the others. They didn't. That has to be done because public health is a number one priority. There has to be a Department of Public Health, and it has to have a major commitment to anticipating, planning for, and handling a variety of threats to the public health. This is childish that this has to be said again, but in the face of our catastrophe now, there's no option. As king, that'd be the first thing to do because public health is a higher priority than private profit. Number two, we have to understand that an economic system is judged by how well it organizes the community it is supposed to serve. Virtually everyone, except a handful of folks, understands that extreme inequality has enormously socially disruptive effects. I know there are some of my friends who want to blame Mr. Trump for the divisiveness that racks this country. And sure, he deserves lots of blame. But to blame only him is to miss again. We have redivided the wealth in our country. We have redivided the income over the last 40 years. And it's all been upward, away from the poor, away from the middle, to a very small group at the top. Nothing in the stimulus plan being discussed by the House and Senate addresses that fundamental flaw in our system. And therefore, it does not deal with many of the root causes of what brought us, A, the crisis in 2008, B, the last 10 years of an economy on life support levels of debt, and then see the lack of preparedness over that time to develop a society capable of handling a serious viral attack. Even after the Chinese, who I know are a socialist society in their own eyes, or the South Koreans, who are proudly capitalist, were able to mobilize public and private resources to really attack this virus, and they've done a very good job. We could do that. Americans have every capacity they do, if not more. But our system precluded, prevented, undermined, and slowed something that was driven by time. That has to be faced, and what I see is a government abetted by mainstream media that don't want to look at any of it. The $2 trillion, or however much it takes, that the government now proposes to spend, let me remind you, will be paid for in large part by government debt. And it will encourage our corporate sector, already laden with record levels of debt, to borrow even more. And the amount of money, literally crumbs off the table, thrown to average people with a $1,200 check, and even many of them won't get it, is an insult both to our intelligence and to the scope of the problem we face.
Wow. You're not holding back here. We hit a hard break in 45 seconds. Final thoughts on this and where you expect it to be heading?
Well, I expect us to have to learn this bitter lesson again. As I've tried to argue over the last 10 or 12 years, we've had to learn the lesson of 2008. But let me put it this way. You can trickle down, which is what we're doing again, or you can trickle up, which is to help the people at the bottom and put the burden of adjustment on the corporate sector and the business sector to cope, but with a support from below for the mass of people. At the very least, even if it doesn't work, you've helped the majority, which was not what we're doing now. We're helping the minority at the top. For a country that calls itself democratic, that is a bizarre way to undertake economic policy.
Yeah, amen. Professor Richard Wolff, democracyatwork.info, rdwolf.com with 2 Fs, Prof. Wolff on Twitter. Professor, thank you for dropping by. It's always illuminating.
Thank you, Tom. Glad to talk with you, really.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We'll be right back. We'll continue with more of the news of the day and your calls right after this.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Stick around. We'll be right back. And welcome back. Mike in Lomita, California. Hey, Mike, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, I just wanted to talk about the looming shortage of life support equipment and throw some cold water on the idea I heard expressed earlier that ventilators are just a simple little gadget that'll be easy to make. 2 examples. Once I was in charge of respiration for a pediatric patient being transported 86 miles from the high desert to a seaside trauma center. And the attending physician had just bought this new transport ventilator, which he really, really wanted us to use. However, every time we attached it to the patient, the kid went crazy. We had to scrape him off the ceiling of the ambulance because the machine, which I'm sure would be very good for ventilating other machines, was not dealing very well with a live animal. So the idea that some little mechanical gadget is going to enhance the survival prospects of people who are intubated is perhaps a little simple-minded.
I get
you need something a little more complicated.
That said, one of the things Governor Cuomo said is that they're splitting their ventilators, that they're able to use one ventilator with 2 people because basically it's just blowing air out. Do I have that right?
Well, it's actually a lot more complicated than
yesterday.
Yeah. That's ghastly thought altogether. Basically, this is when you're basically just sort of giving up on the idea of trying to individually assure a patient's survival.
Right.
The other example, though, is an older style ventilator we used to have in use which was put in use on a ward patient and came rounds in the morning, and there was a patient dead in the bed. But the ventilator was fine. It kept puffing right away. So I think we need something a little more in the modern era than some simple tool designer's idea of what constitutes a ventilator. By the way, in Britain, to show you what can happen in a country that has not been made great again, the government got together a few industrial firms, Rolls-Royce among them, since they're not making that many jet engines now, and they are coming up with mass production of ventilators, which prototype will be out the end of the week, and they expect to have thousands of them rolling off the line in about 5 weeks. Why we're not doing it here? Yeah.
Why didn't we start doing that in January or even in December when we knew that this was coming?
When we knew.
I mean,
right.
Yeah. It's like, Trump sat on this thing for 2.5 months and possibly longer. What we're hearing is our spy agencies knew what was going on in December, early December. And coming out of Wuhan, I mean, we have very, very effective spy agencies. It's just breathtaking. Thank you, Mike. Heather in Seattle. Hey, Heather, thanks for listening to KBCS. What's up?
Hey, I just want to share with everybody how deadly this virus is. Last night I got a call that the third person I know has passed away from this. And what I want to tell people is to take this seriously, because our government isn't. Our government has left us on our own.
Yeah. Heather, I'm so sorry to hear.
I want to tell people to prepare. I want to tell people to take care of each other. And I want to tell especially the states that are not getting any sort of assistance that please reach out to your neighbors and to your friends and beg them to be careful.
Yeah, there you go. Heather, thank you for the call. We'll be right back. Our 1-hour free podcast recaps our show, and it's available wherever fine podcasts are found. And we have the full 3-hour podcast available over at thomhartmann.com if you want to really support our program. We have a new video up over at thomhartmann.com for people who are regular supporters of our program, and the essence of it is, I use a couple of examples. There's hundreds of them out there. In one case, Alabama is preparing to execute a man who was not guilty of the crime that he committed with a relatively high level of certainty, but still they're gonna kill this guy, an African American. And the other story out of New York State, where the police officers hogtied this guy, arms, elbows behind him, tied his legs together, and then threw him down a flight of stairs, mangled his face. He looked he was totally beaten. 12 hours later, he commits suicide in his cell. How is it possible that our prisons do this kind of stuff? Because the 13th Amendment says that slavery is still legal in the United States. You have no rights if you've been convicted of a crime. We need to amend the Constitution. Check it out at thomhartmann.com. Well, welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And Rita in Chicago. Hey, Rita, what's up?
Nice to talk to you, Mr. Hartmann. I'd just like to tell you that once upon a time I got in on a Good Morning America book deal back in the 90s. I became one of their 10 top finalists. I didn't win the contest, but I had to sign all that paperwork with Simon & Schuster. It was about a story when I was 13 years old. I thought my mother told me he died in the war. And then I walked in and saw my father on TV. His name, John Conti, my grandfather's name, Frank Massiano, and as an Italian, I take offense that Trump can be the head of the mafia. Just a little joke there.
Okay,
but anyway,
so, Rita, first of all, you shouldn't be giving out the names of your ancestors here. But
he's pretty
what's
famous
the point you're trying to make?
Okay, so I'm in politics my whole life. 13 years old, I ran away from home because of a riot, Ohio Penitentiary. Gave a list of demands to governor at 13 years old. So politics is my thing. Jim
So
Baker.
what's your point?
I knew him from Philadelphia. I'm born and raised Delaware, lived in Midwest.
You're talking about
30 years
the
now.
televangelist.
Yes, Tammy Baker. I used to watch him in Philadelphia, but now he's on my TV show. His show, 7 days a week. I can watch him twice a day. So I've been watching him for about 1,000 hours. So now I want to tell you that on March 2nd, he had this guy. It's totally a Republican, whatever you want to call it. He claims that he talks to Trump weekly. Okay, and if you listen to all the programs like I'd have. But anyway, on March 2nd, he had this pastor, Zach Drew, who coined a phrase, medical martial law, and said that would cancel the upcoming elections. And he's...
Yeah, Rita, I'm going to let you go, but I got your point. And there's a lot of right-wing crazy running around, and I guess Sean appropriately named Thursday as Conspiracy Theory Thursday. Chris in Atlanta, Georgia. Hey, Chris, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. Good afternoon. I want to ask a simple question. I don't understand it. If the government is a backstop for the banks and corporations, are we still a capitalist society?
Yes. Yeah. This is not a major structural change that's happening. This is kind of filling in the holes. So I would say that we still are, Chris. Chris, thanks for the call. Calvin in Dighton, Kansas. Am I saying that right, Calvin?
Yeah, that's right, Tom. My biggest question is this. It's about the stimulus package. How come we are not raising all kinds of cane about all the pork in this damn bill? $600 million to liberal arts, another $100 million to something that has absolutely nothing to do with coronavirus.
There is no money going to liberal arts. Calvin, this screaming that I'm hearing from Republicans, like, oh my God, there's money for the Kennedy Center in here. The Kennedy Center is a federally owned facility. And if you want to keep those employees whole, then, you do that. I mean, this is what we're doing. We're putting in money for federal employees. We're putting in money for private employees. But, save me the faux outrage. Michael in Birmingham, Alabama. Hey, Michael, what's up?
Hey there. I've been listening to you for about a year, and I'm a big fan of what you do. So thank you.
Thank you.
I just had a question regarding living here in Alabama. I fear that the U.S. is becoming the United States of Alabama, just because here, with people that are working in like non-essential jobs right now, there are places that aren't closing, but yet people that work there and who are living in quarantine and fear of just getting sick cannot collect unemployment. And I'm in that kind of situation, and I just
is that because of the state unemployment laws, or because they have some work requirement or something like that to get unemployment?
Yeah, work requirements being in terms of that you're either sick with the virus, or that your employer kind of laid you off. And I left my job temporarily just because I ran into some health issues about a year ago, and those are things I'm still trying to figure out. And things are coming, there are bills to be paid and things like that. And I'm just burning through my savings like so many other Alabamians, Americans, etc. And, I just think about it like this. This is actually a tweet that I saw from a journalist here. It says, if Donald Trump tells everyone to go back to normal next week, don't do it. If Governor Kay Ivey says it's okay, don't do it. This is a death cult, and you don't have to follow it to where it's going. Stay home.
Is Kay Ivey your governor there in Alabama?
Yes, unfortunately. But she is. And my thing is that I just want to know what people's thoughts are on worker protections for people that are falling between the cracks. Thank you.
Yeah, I get it. Thank you, Michael. We need to do fundamental structural reform with regard to our economy. It's not going to happen with Republicans in power. Another reason to make sure that you're registered to vote and that you're signed up for absentee ballots in whatever state you happen to be in.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
We'll be back with more of your calls in just a moment. Stick around. Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is The Black Panthers, Portraits from an Unfinished Revolution, edited by Briasha and Yohuro Williams. This is from Chapter 1, In Defense of Self-Defense, Pathways to the Black Panther Party. People joined the Black Panther Party for many different reasons. The moment of politicization was different for everyone, but a few were commonly shared, including the 1963 bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham, Alabama, and the 1965 Watts Urban Rebellion. A more general sense of frustration and alienation compelled others to join the Panthers' ranks. The party exerted an enormous pull on the imagination of the members, especially those who had experienced police brutality. In the rebellious spirit of the times, the party's bold stance on self-defense resonated with those seeking fresh alternatives for achieving social justice and black liberation. Party members expressed a deep appreciation for other aspects of the Panthers program, including its community service programs, which grew out of a genuine love for the people. My neighborhood friend, a sister that I've known since I was about 11 years old, said, "Claudia, I want you to go with me. We're going to go and hear these Panthers speak at PS 92, which was an elementary school in our community." I said, "Okay, I'll go, I'm down." I listened to these brothers speak and I heard the pitch. I saw the determination and I saw the compassion. I thought, wow, this is the feeling that I used to get when I went into clubs and popped my fingers and got on the dance floor. It was the same feeling, except it was bigger for me now. It was bigger than me. It was full of love of the people. No longer did we have to argue and fight about, what are you looking at me like that for? Or don't step on my sneaker, or this is my block. Now we really had something to fight for. We had a people to fight for. This is bigger than any gang or club. We had a goal. We had something to look forward to, which was the betterment of black people. It was most definitely something that I was searching for, but I didn't yet know what that I was searching. I didn't find it. It fell on me. That was the first meeting. That's what actually started the wheels in my mind for me to become political. I was rank and file. I did a lot of things. The easiest way to say it is just to imagine worker bees. You got one queen, everyone else works. Rank and file. Those were the worker bees. We did it all. The one thing I enjoyed the most was teaching the political education classes on 7th Avenue in front of the Harlem office. That was the most fruitful. But anything I did, it was for the love of the people. Wherever I was sent, or whatever I had to do, it didn't matter anymore because it was for the love of the people. We were trying to get the word out. If I had to sell 125 papers in a day and I got close to that goal, then I did a good job. I was originally from Queens and came out of the Corona branch of the Black Panther Party. When the Panther 21 were arrested and went to jail, in order to keep those offices open and functioning, Panthers were sent all over the city to Harlem. I was one of the Panthers that ended up in the Harlem branch. That's how I got to be there on Wednesday nights to give the PE classes, the political education classes. I was extremely nervous the first time, but once I found my voice, then it went like clockwork. A lot of the people in the community who were just walking by were like, well, let me stop and see what this little girl is talking about, because I was indeed a little girl at that time. We started off every PE class with a 10-point program, and we ended every PE class with, okay, let me hear from you guys. What do you want to see different in your community, and how are you living? Then we would get the feedback, and then we would know how to concentrate our efforts. Rent strikes were crazy, because if you had to live like that, why should you pay rent? We did clothing drives. We did food drives. We did, of course, the breakfast program. There were a lot of other things that happened, and they might have been more meaningful, but those PE classes stayed with me. We were outside on the street in front of the office. When you were giving a class or you were having a talk inside the office and there were only Panthers around you, the feeling was just different than outside on the street. The Panthers knew what you were doing because they were Panthers and they were doing the same thing. Outside, there were constant questions and answers with the people. You had to give yourself up when you were outside in that crowd. You never knew who was going to say, we don't care about that, we don't care about you, you need to go away. There were a lot of people that just did not know where we were coming from and were afraid that if they were seen in the office or if they were seen asking questions, that they'd get reprisals, that they'd end up getting hurt. They were afraid. Things went so fast. Time seems to accelerate when you're always looking over your shoulder. At this time, it was all-out war against the Panthers, and brothers are being shot down in the street or set up or going to jail for years. We have brothers in jail since that time, 40, 41 years. We've had brothers that we've lost on the inside that we can't let the world forget. The government said, okay, we're going to lock them up and throw away the key and no one will ever care. But it's not true. We want them out. We want freedom for all political prisoners. We don't want any more of them to die on the inside. That's the biggest injustice. There were times when our cadre consisted of almost nothing but women, and that was when the brothers were locked up or had to go underground. I remember being on a front line against a policeman on horseback and being 6 months pregnant. What we wanted was a simple street light, and we got the community out there and we blocked traffic. I didn't know whether I was going to be trampled, my baby killed, but I knew I had to be there. I was an active member of the party from 1968 to 1971, and in those few years, I aged 10, 15 years. We didn't have much time to be little girls. We went straight to womanhood. Talking about these things is bringing up all of these feelings, though I hadn't thought about or touched on them for a long time. It seems that as you get older and you look back on the things that you've done in your life, you say, oh my God, I could have gotten killed then. When you're young, fear is not really in your vocabulary, and once you look back, you wonder, why wasn't I afraid? We didn't have much time to be afraid. It was all about survival. The Black Panthers. I'll Gamble and Professor Richard Wolff join me for a survival guide in a coronavirus economy. And Richard Hallam, author of Common Sense for the 21st Century, drops by to explain what is the Extinction Rebellion and what do they do. Check it out wherever you find great podcasts. And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. On the line with us is Peter Maybarduk. He is a human rights lawyer, but more to the point right now, he's the director of Public Citizens Global Access to Medicines Program. Citizen.org, of course, is their website. His Twitter handle is Maybarduk, Maybarduk, or at Public Citizen. Peter, welcome to the program.
Great to be with you.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us. So, it has been reported that Gilead Sciences is developing one of the most promising antiviral drugs that may be effective against this particular coronavirus. And I saw an article last week that they were trying to get a special kind of patent protection that would allow them to basically do massive price gouging. I saw an article yesterday that said that they'd backed off on that. What's the status of this? You want to explain to us to our listeners and viewers, what's going on?
Absolutely. So Gilead Sciences, a big pharmaceutical company based in California, tried to game the system, tried to get itself an extended monopoly on a drug that may be effective. We don't know yet, but may be effective against coronavirus. Sort of an extra 2-year period in which they could exclude competitors and thereby keep prices high, protect their monopoly pricing power for a longer period of time. They tried to do this by telling the world and claiming to the Food and Drug Administration that COVID-19 is a rare disease.
So this was a special provision for companies that make drugs that really don't have much commercial upside to them because they actually are for rare diseases. So they're not going to sell a lot of this stuff. Gilead tried to use that provision, and I guess you could argue, 5 months ago, coronavirus was rare. They tried to use that provision to feather their nest, to enhance their bottom line. Were they successful? Will they be successful?
They have decided. Well, there was an uproar as soon as this was revealed, and they have backed off for now. And so it's a little bit of a public win, but it also shows sort of the environment that we're in, that there's an appreciation of how sensitive access to medicine issues are going to be, and that it's actually very important now to take the next step. We need to be telling Gilead and really all the companies that are involved in production potential treatments and vaccines that we expect them to commit their science to the public domain. We expect them to say, we're not going to let commercial confidential information or patents or anything else get in the way of the world more rapidly developing the next treatment, vaccine, building on the successes we have, or getting in the way of people's access to those treatments. So we can compensate companies with reasonable royalties for everything that they are doing. They will be fine, but we can't let the usual sort of monopoly scenario play out here. It would come at the cost potentially of a great many people's lives.
Yeah. You're Public Citizens Global Access to Medicines Program Director. And I saw a troubling news story a couple days ago suggesting that, this chloroquine, this drug that Donald Trump has been hyping, well, first of all, just I guess yesterday, a study came out showing that it actually doesn't do anything. This is a small Chinese study. It was 30 people. The study out of France that said that it did do something was only 40 people. This is a study of 30 people out of China, and they found that people who were treated with hydroxychloroquine were no more likely to be than others to be put on bed rest, oxygen, and fluids. If they were simply put on those things, they recovered just as rapidly. But the article that I saw that really concerned me, because this is a drug that is important for a lot of other conditions, from lupus to malaria, was that India has announced that as part of their countrywide shutdown, they're also blocking all exports of chloroquine. I understand that 95% of all of our prescription drugs in the United States, or at least our generic drugs, are manufactured in either India or China. And I'm wondering how much of the chloroquine that we sell in the United States or use in the United States is actually manufactured in India. Is it most of it? Is it a little bit of it? And what's happening with this supply chain? I mean, how long is it going to be before Americans start running out of pharmaceuticals?
Well, we don't know, but it is an issue that a number of people are attentive to. The most pharmaceutical active ingredient worldwide is initially sourced from India and China, and then it is it is packaged and formulated and then distributed around the world. But the compounds are largely, not exclusively, but largely put together in India and China. So it's going to be important to keep those supply chains open. And one real challenge right now, as you note, is that we are seeing nationalistic response. Last I heard was 62 countries have implemented some kind of medical export restrictions for various products since coronavirus started taking off. So, it's going to vary. Some of those responses may be appropriate, but it's really dangerous right now to look at this as sort of like a nation-by-nation problem, because the supply chains are indeed global, and we do not have time, for example, to develop separate full supply chains and manufacturing capacities. We do need to keep flowing what we have.
Yeah. My understanding is that back in the day, back in the 1960s or 70s or 80s, there was a massive tax break written into legislation for the pharmaceutical industry if they manufactured their drugs in Puerto Rico. And for decades, Puerto Rico was manufacturing central for the Western Hemisphere for pharmaceuticals. And that it was apparently during the Bush administration that they reversed that out. And that's when Puerto Rico really started, their economy started to collapse. Is my recollection correct? And B, if so, are any of those idled pharmaceutical factories in Puerto Rico able to be revived so that we can start manufacturing pharmaceuticals here in the Western Hemisphere?
I don't know the specific Puerto Rico case, but here's another way of thinking about it. Rather than sort of hunkering down and saying we're only going to purchase products made in the United States and we're going to stop exporting elsewhere, we should just be saying we need the supply lines that are intact, and we need to ramp up production radically, as you have said, everywhere, which may well include Puerto Rico. Where there is excess capacity or older capacity, it should be reignited. And one of the bills that I think it's in one of the ones that has already passed, but it might be one of the ones that Congress is still debating. There are provisions to do some of that sort of thing. But we do need to go considerably further. You'll see in the headlines now a lot of discussion of what's called the Defense Production Act. We and many others are trying to push the Trump administration to invoke this existing law to ramp up the public production of masks, ventilators, and yes, potential, if we can find them, effective treatments and vaccines eventually. And we already need to be bringing those factories online now if we are going to produce and ensure an adequate supply in some matter of months. So that's very important and is part of the response. We both need to sort of curb pharmaceutical industry price gouging and get them to commit their science to the public interest. And we need to ramp up the public response, both through public production and through using this law to have companies prioritize their government contracts and bring a greater supply online. So it is sort of like all the world needs to move together on this. All countries need to be contributing as much as they can to production, new production capacity, even as we keep the supply chain that we have.
To the best of your knowledge, is the Trump administration, or for that matter, Congress, doing anything to promote what, the prescription that you just laid out? No pun intended.
They are sort of back and forth on it each day. As usual, it's difficult to parse what the Trump administration is actually doing, and they'll sort of say opposite things on a given day. But the pressure has increased quite a bit, and I think the trend is toward more use of this productive capacity. We just need to move them. We need them to move faster and more broadly, both on that production front and on the sort of reasonable pricing of products.
Could they use the Defense Production Act and simply say to the big pharmaceutical companies in America, you will start manufacturing this stuff in the United States next week?
Yes, they could. It's there are legal wrinkles to be sure, but the short answer is yes, they could. And of course, it depends on which products we can bring online where, and sort of dotting I's and crossing T's. But broadly speaking, the government can tell the companies to do that. It can also do it itself. So, for example, if the government wants to produce remdesivir, this Gilead product that we're talking about, it can do it in government factories, and it can tell Gilead to move more production along as well. Right. There are particulars, but I think what matters for all of us is we need a clarion call that says, Trump administration, you need to do this as broadly as you can right now. All our lives are at stake.
Right, and this remdesivir, wasn't that developed with something like $19 million of U.S. taxpayer money?
Yeah, more than that, at least $60 million. There may be other ways to count it in the clinical trials. Yeah, I think it may be a higher number too, but right now there are ongoing trials, I think, at NIH and CDC. So the people are already paying for the development of that drug. Gilead is putting money in too, but it's a joint venture, and so even if it weren't a crisis, we should have a say in how that product is priced and distributed.
Remarkable. Peter Maybarduk, the Director of Public Citizens Global Access to Medicine Program and a human rights lawyer. Citizen.org is the website. Maybarduk, Maybarduk is his Twitter handle. Peter, thank you for dropping by.
Thanks so much.
Good talking with you. We'll be back in just a moment. Stick around. It's the Thom Hartmann Program.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
More of the news of the day and your calls right after this. Stick around. Okay, and welcome back. For some reason, I'm not able to put this caller back on hold. It's very strange. And I don't know why that is. Yeah, okay. Let's see here. Charles in Miami, Florida. Hey, Charles, what's on your mind today?
I was kind of pissed off, I'll be honest with you, with Representative Pocan. And I just feel like, these, I don't know if he's a moderate. I'm not sure. But I know
he's as progressive as they come, Charles. He's just, the reality is that the Republicans control the Senate. The Republicans wrote this legislation. The first bill that was passed, it was an $800 billion bill. It was a pretty good bill. That was written by the Democrats in the House, and, it was a good, solid piece. So then the Republicans said, okay, it's our turn. And, probably a third of the money that's going out is going to their buddies. But that's the price you've got to pay. Elections have consequences, Charles.
But we hold the cards in our hands as well. They can't do anything without us. As far as
not true.
The Democrats,
they have a simple majority in the Senate. They can block anything that comes out of the House, and they can pass a lot of stuff. If they just want to pass it by reconciliation, they could pass legislation without any Democrats at all, and then say to the House, we dare you.
Well, dare us, because we have nothing to lose. Main Street we're already on our.
We're losing the lives of our citizens, Charles.
Well, okay, but this is what I'm trying to say. We already suffer, and if they have to suffer too, so be it. But how can you say that it's almost all right, and we have to work with these guys when you have corporations that's going to get bailed out, and they still don't want to pay into Social Security. Tell me
Or
how
taxes.
that is right. Yeah, or the taxes, yes. There's people out here suffering, and I'm just getting sick of it. I'm tired of it, but we need people that's going to fight for us too. And throughout this whole election process, throughout this whole nomination process, I just feel like, these moderate Republicans, they're in bed with the Republicans. These moderate Democrats. I mean, they are turning the knives in our backs as we speak, and it's like every man for themselves. And I'm sick of it as a progressive. I just feel like these moderates.
So would you rather that the House of Representatives just says to this $2 trillion Senate bill, sorry, we're not going to do it? Is that what you're saying?
Damn right, yes. And if we all have to suffer collectively, yes, because since 2000,
I'm not willing to see my fellow working people in this country, people who are not rich, people who, I'm not willing to see them go down in flames, Charles. I'm just not. I'm willing to let some corporate fat cats make a little extra money if it means that the average person can get a little bit of a bailout. I'm willing to pay that price.
Mainstream is suffering. Mainstream is already suffering at the hands of greedy corporate America. So we're already feeling the pain. The thing is, they are not.
Right. You want systemic change, though. We've got to change. We've got to flip the Senate and the White House. And, we've got that's coming up in 9 months. And, hopefully we can pull it off. But right now, we've got a Republican in the White House and the Senate in Republican hands. And, Charles, I get your outrage. In fact, I share your outrage. But, I think we have to also acknowledge the political realities. Charles, thanks a lot for the call. We'll be back. It's 10 minutes before the hour. Stick around. It's the Thom Hartmann Program, helping you win the water cooler wars. And, fair and only slightly unbalanced. We'll be right back. Stick around. Hey, did you know that Hillary Clinton actually won Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, North Carolina, and Florida in the 2016 election? It's on page 92 of my new book, The Hidden History of the War on Voting. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Dave in Goodman, Wisconsin. Hey, Dave, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. I just wanted to talk about this deal with the hydroxychloroquine. I've been prescribed this for about 8 years now. I have rheumatoid arthritis. And so Trump goes out and touts this as some miracle drug with actually no test data behind it. And now all these people have gone out and hoarded it. And it's also prescribed for lupus, which probably is a worse condition than I have. And now when I want to get it, I might have a problem getting it. And apparently the price tripled in the meantime, too. So, it's not a matter of life and death for me, but that was totally so irresponsible by this man. And just a typical example of what he does. And, it's like I said, it's not a matter of life and death for me, but there's people with serious problems that this is actually prescribed for. So, anyway.
Yeah, I'm with you, Dave. Dave, thank you. Thanks for sharing that story. And tripled in price. Oh my God. I just wanted to tell you a little story about something that I might have figured out. I think Louise and I have been trying to. We get groceries, and when they come in, there's actually a great video over at Daily Kos right now, DAILYKOS.com, and it's a Michigan doctor, a doctor in Michigan, who, in fact, I'll tweet it at the top of the hour. A doctor in Michigan who is telling people how to disinfect your groceries. So when groceries come, and as well carry-out food or delivered food, how to disinfect that stuff. And it's fascinating. It's short. It's right to the point. It's just brilliant. But Louise and I, we've been mostly just living on the food that we had ordered, or back when I was telling you all to start stocking up. And we've had a few deliveries, although that one from Kroger just never showed up, even though they billed my credit card. But the conclusion I came to was, how about, I'm looking for a food that I can have delivered where I can cook the container it's in as well as the food. And so we ordered pizza yesterday. We got 2 large pizzas, which will last us a couple of days. And, local place that makes them with a great gluten-free crust and vegan cheese even. And we had the person leave it outside the door, just in the cardboard boxes. And then I went out and I picked up the cardboard boxes and took them into the house, and Louise had preheated the oven to 300 degrees. She opens the oven door and I stick the pizzas in their boxes in the oven. Closed the door, washed my hands really vigorously, and just left them in there for about 15 minutes. I understand that heat kills this virus, and so I'm hopeful that it seems compliant with some of the suggestions out there. So we'll see. Anyhow, Mark in Chicago. Hey, Mark, what's on your mind today?
Thank you, Tom, for letting me in. You're a science-based guy, so I'm going to hit you with this. My daughter sent me a map this morning about the effect of carbon dioxide after areas had been shut down, stay in place, shelter in place, whatever you want to call it. And it got me to thinking, what if that's not just the effect, but part of the cause and the cure? What if the coronavirus, one of these viruses that has come out lately from places previously unknown? We know the rainforest is being destroyed million acres at a time. We know that permafrost is no longer permanently frost, that things that were locked away for eons are now out in the wild.
Yep.
What if this coronavirus, this COVID-19, is using carbon dioxide not only as a transmission method, a vehicle, but what if it's also using it as food?
It's not, Mark. First of all, it's not a living organism. Viruses, no, I can tell you, it's not. Viruses are not living organisms. They don't ingest nutrition. They don't excrete waste. They reproduce by hijacking actual cells and causing the cells to make more of themselves. They're basically just a string of, in this case, a string of RNA, and which is how they hijack a cell. So that's not happening. But your earlier point was fascinating. Marilyn in Sarasota, Florida. Hey, Marilyn, got a quick one here?
Hi, Tom. I agree with Charles. I am so outraged.
I am upset about it too. But the simple fact is that the Republicans control the Senate. You're going to get nothing but crappy legislation out of it.
They don't have the majority right now because they got so many out sick or in isolation.
They have 3 out sick, so it's 47 to 47 right now. And pretty soon you're going to start seeing Democrats going out sick. But that's still no reason to say we're going to deprive Americans of some benefit under this legislation because we want to deprive the fat cat CEOs.
But they wouldn't be depriving them because they would still pass it.
Yeah.
I mean, the Democrats just never take a stand and say no. The Republicans really were desperate to pass something, and so was Trump.
Bernie came out and said that he was going to vote no on this legislation.
He voted yes. I'm shocked.
If they didn't, Marilyn, Bernie came out and said he was going to vote no on this legislation if they didn't put in some sort of oversight on the $500 billion that's going to corporations. They backed off. They put in the oversight. There's going to be an oversight commission that's going to be appointed by Nancy Pelosi and Donald Trump. And so there will be some of our people. They also created the ability of congressional oversight on this money. And they also put in a thing where the money, where the money goes has to be published within a few weeks of it going out. Before, the Republicans had said Donald Trump will be the oversight, Steve Mnuchin will pass out the money, and we will never publish where the money went to. So Bernie made that bill a hell of a lot better. It still is, not the world's greatest legislation, but it is getting help to our hospitals, to our states, and to our people. I'm with Governor Cuomo. It's too little too late, but it's something. So, I just don't feel like, there's any sellout at all in saying that. I think that we have to acknowledge that. We'll be back. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
have a new video up over at thomhartmann.com for people who are regular supporters of our program, and the essence of it is, you know, I use a couple of examples. There's hundreds of them out there. In one case, Alabama is preparing to execute a man who was not guilty of the crime that he committed with a relatively high level of certainty, but still they're gonna kill this guy, you know, an African American. And the other story out of New York State, where the police officers hogtied this guy, arms, elbows behind him, tied his legs together, and then threw him down a flight of stairs, mangled his face. He looked he was totally beaten. 12 hours later, he commits suicide in his cell. How is it possible that our prisons do this kind of stuff? Because the 13th Amendment says that slavery is still legal in the United States. You have no rights if you've been convicted of a crime. We need to amend the Constitution. Check it out at thomhartmann.com. Competitive markets produce the greatest good for the greatest number. The book is Under the Influence by Robert H. Frank.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, broadcasting live from my home studio in Portland. On the line with us is Victoria Jones, our old friend, a chief Washington analyst with the D.C. radio company out of Washington, D.C. Her Twitter handle is Victoria Jones D.C. Victoria, welcome back.
Hi, Tom.
It's great to have you with us. So just a few weeks ago, I was reading news stories about how the UK's health minister was telling Boris Johnson, we should just let this run through the British public and, some old people will die, but beyond that, we'll all have herd immunity, and that'll be a wonderful thing. And that kind of thinking was what informed Boris Johnson's procrastination on this. And there's some evidence that Boris Johnson had been talking to Donald Trump, and it might have informed Donald Trump procrastinating ever since late December, early January, when his spy agencies told him this was coming. What do we know about this?
Well, I don't know what, if anything, informed Donald Trump's thinking. Apparently not the 2016 document that they saw in 2017, which Politico had uncovered from the NSC, saying this is a playbook for dealing with pandemics. But Boris Johnson, who has got libertarian tendencies, apparently liked the idea of herd immunity, which the UK's chief scientists were touting all over the airwaves. And not surprisingly, Britons were listening to this and going, herd immunity, that sounds like cows and sheep. And they were looking at each other like, we're not actually sheep. And we don't even like the idea of sheep having to all die to get herd immunity. And this really went down like the Edson account. What's the worst advertising account ever? This is how this one went down. So then number 10 Downing Street started blaming its communications team for, why did you let this happen? Well, because they let this happen because it was the biggest disaster ever.
Wow. And I understand that in the UK, particularly in London, they're starting to see, apparently in terms of increases in infections and ICU hospitalizations and deaths, that the UK is now probably just a few weeks behind New York City. Do I have that right?
Yeah. The National Health Service hospitals are calling it a tsunami at the moment. Boris Johnson gave a speech on Monday, a short speech on Monday. It was a good speech, actually. I watched it. It was a good speech announcing really a total lockdown, very severe lockdown on the UK, even to the extent they've now got drones and helicopters going over some areas saying, well, is that like a legitimate dog walk? No, it's not. Well, you've got to go back. They're even giving police powers to arrest people under certain circumstances if they're breaking the lockdown. I would like to give you two pieces of good news out of the UK before we get into some more quite extraordinary news about Boris Johnson. Two pieces of really quite good news. One is something that hasn't happened yet, and it is happening at 4 p.m. Eastern today, and it's called Clap for Carers. And all over the UK today, at 8 p.m. their time, 4 p.m. our time, everybody in the UK, or just about everybody, is going to clap for everybody in the National Health Service because they are just so incredibly grateful. They're going to go outside onto their balconies everywhere they are. So if people in the U.S. feel the same way about the workers in the National Health Service, they can join in. So that's one thing. And the other thing is that about a day ago, the National Health Service said, we need volunteers. We need an army of volunteers. And they gave 4 categories of help. If you're over 18 and healthy, obviously. Within 24 hours, they had over 500,000 volunteers to help.
Wow. That's extraordinary.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, this is what, yeah, that's extraordinary. So you said you've got some more news about Boris Johnson. Tell us about that.
Yeah, this is very interesting. The European Union reached out to Britain. They've got a scheme in the EU to source life-saving ventilators to treat coronavirus. And the idea is that the EU countries are all banding together to get the best price on ventilators. And Boris Johnson has said, no, we're not going to be part of that because we're no longer a member and we're making our own efforts. And critics are accusing Boris Johnson of putting Brexit over breathing because they're saying you can't get the same price. You just can't get the same price. And they've offered to help.
Yeah, I understand that Lord Dyson, the guy who invented the vacuum cleaner, or his version of it, and owns the Dyson vacuum cleaner company, has invented a ventilator. He's going to go into production in the next few weeks in the UK. He's British. And it's going to be less expensive than regular ventilators, and he thinks he can have 10,000 of them made over the next few months. Are you familiar with that?
I've heard about that, so that's exciting.
Might that be part of Boris Johnson's math?
I think it might be part of his math. There are various things that I think are part of his math, but I think critics are saying a big part of his math is that just this go-it-alone spirit, we're just doing it ourselves. And a lot of critics are really saying, this is not the time. You know, if you can get a better price by banding together and people are offering to help, why wouldn't you do this?
Yeah, it makes sense. And you said there was there was more Boris Johnson news beyond that?
One of the other piece of news relates to the Labour leadership battle that is still going on. It's hard to believe that this leadership election is still going on. It's been 4 months now that there's been an election going on to replace Jeremy Corbyn at the top of the Labour leadership. Of course, that's the opposition party. Jeremy Corbyn had his last Prime Minister's questions yesterday, and he took Boris Johnson to task, actually, over self-employed assistants pretty effectively. And this leadership contest will go on until April the 2nd. They're still voting. And there's some criticism within the Labour Party itself as to why couldn't they speed it up so that they could actually have a new leader in place to effectively take on Boris Johnson and not have a lame duck. And that's been a big discussion point within the Labour Party.
Interesting. I know you're a cat person. We were browsing around YouTube yesterday, Louise and I, and discovered videos for cats. And most of them are British, actually. And they're people throwing food on tabletops and in outdoor settings, and birds and mice and squirrels coming and snatching the food. And our cat, Ketty, spent literally 5 hours watching this video yesterday, and then he missed 2 meals. He would not leave the bed. Even when the TV was turned off, he sat there for another 2 hours waiting for it to come back on again. And then this morning I turned it on, and he sat there for another few hours. So you've got to check this thing out, Victoria. It's
wow.
Kind of
that's the answer.
Because you're the one who told us about shoestrings.
Yeah, shoestrings are the other thing. But I want to get my cats playing tic-tac-toe because I've been reading about all these tic-tac-toes, people playing that with their cats. Seriously, yeah. People are laying out tic-tac-toe on the floor, and they play it with their cats. And sometimes the cats win.
Yeah, that's funny. We've been making jokes about, our cat is now addicted to these videos. And, should we put screen time limits on him? And now another one of our cats is starting to watch them along with him. So 2 of our 3 cats are sitting there in front of the TV going, oh, wow. Anyhow, Victoria Jones with the DC Radio Company. Thank you, Victoria.
Thank you, Tom.
Great talking with you. Her Twitter handle is Victoria Jones DC. We'll be right back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
15 minutes past the hour here on the Thom Hartmann Program, your media support group for We the People. We'll be back with your calls and more of the news of the day right after this. And welcome back. Phil in Brookings, South Dakota, watching us on Free Speech TV. Hey, Phil, what's up? Phil, you are on the air. Hey, what's up?
Yes, I wonder how they gave in on the payroll deduction deal, how that will affect our Social Security. What's your thought on it?
I don't think it will, Phil. What it is basically, it's not that these companies don't have to pay it, it's that they don't have to pay it until December of next year or December of this year, one or the other, but basically till December. It's a postponement, a deferral. And, you know, one of our callers asked Congressman Pocan about it this morning, and he said, you know, A, they just saw the bill last night or early this morning, so they really don't know for sure. But B, what they have heard, because there's been a lot of sturm and drag about this, particularly on progressive news sites, is that it's not as big a deal. It's not something to be so worried about. Phil, thank you for the call. Ron in San Francisco, watching us on YouTube. Hey, Ron, what's up?
I'm concerned about an issue, and that's the kids who are vaping the e-cigarette products and any kind of substance that they put into it. And they're the lung afflictions for a few. And now how this virus might be enhanced by users, teen users of the vaping products.
Yeah.
And
well, what is known, Ron, is that people who have any sort of lung damage or lung disease are at higher risk of dying from this virus or getting very, very sick because it basically attacks lung tissue. And so obviously, if you're somebody who smokes or vapes regularly, I'd say smokes in particular, but, you know, and obviously if they're taking these illegal vape products or these, you know, black market vape products that have vitamin E acetate in them, they're going to damage their lungs in ways that will make them more vulnerable. But I think the big message is to smokers to say, you know, you need to quit smoking right now. Justin in Summit Hill, Pennsylvania, watching us on YouTube. Hey, Justin, what's up?
Hi, Tom. How you doing? I'm trying to think a little bit outside the box and saying when they pass this and that sort of stuff, as you were saying regarding corporate people and that sort of stuff being persons and that sort of thing, I was thinking maybe trying to enforce that to maybe means test the corporations in a backdoor way.
Yeah. You know, the simple fact of the matter is that this is a crisis that is bigger than the crisis that this country saw in 1929. And of course, the Great Depression, 1929, all that, you know, went down in flames because Herbert Hoover basically did nothing for 3 years. But this is bigger than that. And as something that is even bigger than that, it's going to take some massive and systematic or systemic response. And, you know, that is what Congress is trying to do. You know, putting a means test on corporations or on, you know, I mean, yes, they means tested individuals. If you make more than $75,000 a year, you're not getting anything out of this this bailout. But, you know, if you're making more than $75,000 a year, you probably don't need anything out of this bailout unless you're really unemployed, in which case you'll get, you know, enhanced unemployment benefits. But the larger issue, I think, Justin, is that originally the bill said, here's $500 billion, we're going to hand it off to big corporations, and it's going to be given out exclusively by Steve Mnuchin, the foreclosure king, and it's going to be oversight. The only oversight is going to be Donald Trump. In fact, Trump himself went on TV and said, I'll be the oversight. And Bernie Sanders said, you guys do that, and I'm going to vote against this bill and bring it down. And so the Republicans went along with having the numbers published within a few weeks, having an oversight board, and having Congress have oversight over this. So those are all good steps. You know, it's not the bill that I would write, but I'm not a Republican. We'll be right back. Our 1 hour free podcast recaps our show, and it's available wherever fine podcasts are found. And we have the full 3 hour podcast available over at thomhartmann.com if you want to really support our program. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, 20 minutes past the hour. Just wanted to bring you up to date on a few things that, you know, we are now past 1,000 people dead in America. Expect to see that number start doubling every few days. This is going to get really grim. This already is really grim in a lot of places in the United States. It's going to start getting really grim really fast in New Orleans, across the state of Florida, and this is going to be sweeping across red states. The red states are just a little behind the blue states. The blue states are the population centers. The blue states are where the big international airports are. The blue states are where the virus seems to be, coming into the country more than the red states, because the red states tend to be low population states and, without much economic activity. I mean, that's that's how the Republicans are able to bamboozle people. So, this is going to get bad, and which I guess we've known all along. So, meanwhile, we discovered today that back in 2016, after the 2014 Ebola outbreak, the Obama White House had the National Security Council. Now, this was back when the National Security Council had a pandemic response team. Trump fired those people 2 years ago. But that pandemic response team put together a manual that literally is called the Pandemic Playbook. What to do if a pandemic happens, whether it's SARS or whether it's a horrible form of influenza or whether it's some ancient virus that just broke out of the ice in Antarctica or whatever. It's literally called the National Security Council's Pandemic Playbook. And it has questions like, quote, is there sufficient personal protective equipment for healthcare workers who are providing medical care? If the answer is yes, what are the triggers to signal exhaustion of supplies? Are additional supplies available? If the answer is no, should the Strategic National Stockpile release personal protective equipment to the states? Another question, what is our level of confidence in the case detection rate? Is diagnostic capacity keeping up? So somebody yesterday, when Politico magazine, published the fact that the Trump administration was given this handbook when they came into office in 2017, in January 2017. They knew about this handbook. They were briefed on it. It's only a couple years old. So the Trump administration knew about this. So what did they say when Politico called them up and said, hey, what about this handbook? They said, we are aware of the document, although it's quite dated. The plan we are executing now is a better fit. Right. Or as Laura Clausen over at Daily Kos says, ha 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 ha, sob. Trump fired the pandemic response team. The Department of Health and Human Services staged a simulated pandemic last fall, but still managed to be unprepared when this one hit. The Department of Homeland Security stopped holding pandemic simulations, part of Trump firing those people. And why did Trump, fire both pandemic response teams, the National Security Council and the Department of Homeland Security? Why did he fire them both? Why did they shelf this pandemic handbook? Probably because it was all done by the Obama administration. Anything done by America's first black president was something that Donald Trump was not going to touch. That's what it comes down to. It had cooties, or whatever, however he characterizes this in his racist little mind. And one of our Canadian listeners sent me a note saying, I said spring break, it's going to be a real problem. You're going to see people who went on spring break or went to Mardi Gras going back to red states all over the United States. And they're going to be seeding those states with cases. And this person writes and says, I thought you'd like to know that 30% of our cases, this is Canadian, are people coming back from the states, between spring breakers and snowbird seniors who were ordered to come home. And she said, Trump went on to say, Trump is going to make Americans radioactive and the USA a pariah state, a pariah-infected state. What nation is going to be willing to let an American into their country? For a long time, Canadians are already asking Trudeau to reinforce the border. And then meanwhile, the coronavirus does not slow down Trump's regulatory rollbacks. This is a piece in the New York Times today. President Trump is pushing ahead with major reversals of environmental regulations. They are working to complete a half dozen significant rollbacks over this month. Weaken automobile fuel efficiency standards, loosen controls on toxic ash from coal plants, relax restrictions on mercury emissions, weaken consideration of climate change and environmental reviews for infrastructure projects. The aggressive timeline is aimed at shielding the policies from easy reversal if Democrats win the White House or control of the Senate in the 2020 election. Several agency officials said they were surprised that political leaders had shown no sign of letting up amid the pandemic. A dozen federal workers who all spoke on the condition of anonymity to the New York Times all described a relentless atmosphere at the EPA and the Interior Department. And the administration understands the electoral map has turned against it, said Richard Wolff, a professor of environmental law at New York University. The administration's industry allies applauded the push to complete deregulation. David Hayes, the director of state energy and environmental impact at the New York University School of Law, said this administration is essentially taking advantage of the fact that the public is distracted and is in fact disabled from fully engaging against this ideological push. So Trump is making the air more poisonous, the water more poisonous, he's making pollution cheaper for companies that do pollute, and rolling back the regulations that would protect you from having your child be neurologically damaged by mercury or having you be poisoned by coal ash in ways that cause cancer. This is a Republican administration. There's no doubt about it. Totally in the bag with these big polluting corporations. We'll be back with your calls and more of the news of the day in just a moment. It's coming up on 28 minutes past the hour here on the Thom Hartmann Program, broadcasting live from my home studio, sheltering in place in Portland, Oregon.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
And we'll be back with more of the news of the day and your calls right after this. Stick around. Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Medical Apartheid, the dark history of medical experimentation on black Americans from colonial times to the present, by Harriet A. Washington. This is from the introduction. On a sylvan stretch of New York's patrician Upper Fifth Avenue, just across from the New York Academy of Medicine, a colossus in marble, august inscriptions, and a bas-relief caduceus grace a memorial bordering Central Park. These laurels venerate the surgeon James Marion Sims, MD, as a selfless benefactor of women. Nor is this the only statuary erected in honor of Dr. Sims. Marble monuments to his skill, benevolence, and humanity guard his native South Carolina's State House, its medical school, the Alabama Capitol grounds, and a French hospital. In the mid-19th century, Dr. Sims dedicated his career to the care and cure of women's disorders and opened the nation's first hospital for women in New York City. He attended French royalty, his Grecian visage inspired oil portraits, and in 1875 he was elected president of the American Medical Association. Hospitals still bear his name, including a West African hospital that utilizes the eponymous gynecological instruments that he first invented for surgeries upon black female slaves in the 1840s. But this benevolent image vies with the detached Marion Sims portrayed in Robert Thom's J. Marion Sims, Gynecological Surgeon, an oil representation of an experimental surgery upon his powerless slave, Betsy. Sims stands aloof, arms folded, one hand holding a metroscope, the forerunner of the speculum, as he regards the kneeling woman in a coolly evaluative medical gaze. His tie and morning coat contrast with her simple servant's dress, head rag, and bare feet. The painting, commissioned and distributed by the Park Davis Pharmaceutical House more than a century after the surgeries, as one of its History and Medicine in Pictures series, takes telling liberties with the historical facts. Thom portrays Betsy as a fully clothed, calm slave woman who kneels complacently on a small table hand modestly raised to her breast before a trio of white male physicians. 2 other slave women peer around a sheet, apparently hung for modesty's sake, in a childlike display of curiosity. This innocuous tableau could hardly differ more from the gruesome reality in which each surgical scene was a violent struggle between the slaves and physicians, and each woman's body was a bloodied battleground. Each naked, unanesthetized slave woman had to be forcibly restrained by the other physicians through her shrieks of agony as Sims determinedly sliced, then sutured her genitalia. The other doctors who could fled when they could bear the horrific screams no longer. It then fell to the women to restrain one another. I wanted to reproduce Tom's painting on the cover of this book, or at least in the text, but when I asked permission of its copyright holder, Pfizer Incorporated, the company insisted on reviewing the entire manuscript of this book before making a decision. As an independent scholar, I could not acquiesce to this, and I used another cover image. When I renewed my request to use the image within the text, Pfizer agreed to base its decision upon reading this chapter and an outline of the book. The Pfizer executives apparently were uncomfortable with what they read because they refused to grant permission to reproduce this telling image or even respond to my query after I supplied the requested chapter and outline. This act of censorship exemplifies the barriers some choose to erect in order to veil the history of unconscionable medical research with blacks. Betsy's voice has been silenced by history, but as one reads Sims' biographers and his own memoirs, a haughty, self-absorbed researcher emerges, a man who bought black women slaves and addicted them to morphine in order to perform dozens of exquisitely painful, distressingly intimate vaginal surgeries. Not until he had experimented with his surgeries on Betsy and her fellow slaves for years did Sims essay to cure white women. Was Sims a savior or a sadist? It depends, I suppose, on the color of the women you ask. Marion Sims epitomizes the two faces, one benign, one malevolent, of American medical research. Quote, of all the forms of inequality, injustice in health is the most shocking and the most inhumane. In 1965, Martin Luther King Jr. spoke those words in Montgomery, Alabama, at the end of the Selma to Montgomery march that had been attended by the black and white physicians of the Medical Committee for Human Rights. King had invited the doctors not only to give medical help to injured marchers, but also to witness the abuse suffered at the hands of segregationists. With these almost unnoticed words, King ushered in a new era in civil rights because, as Delegate to Congress Donna Christensen Christian, MD, chair of the Congressional Black Caucus Health Brain Trust, has declared, health disparities are the civil rights issue of the 21st century. Thus, Dr. King's alarm over racial health injustice was prescient, and were he alive today, his concerns would be redoubled. Mounting evidence of the racial health divide confronts us everywhere we look, from doubled black infant death rates to African-American life expectancies that fall years behind whites. Infant mortality of African-Americans is twice that of whites. The book, Medical Apartheid by Harriet A. Washington. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And Michael in Hammond, Indiana. Hey, Michael, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, how you doing?
Good. What's up?
Is it possible to suspend a national election due to a national emergency?
Congress has the power to do that. The White House does not.
So how does that work? Can you explain that for me?
Well, Congress would have to pass a law saying that we're suspending the election for this particular reason because of this particular emergency, and this is when the election will be held. Congress has never done that. We went through the Civil War without doing that, and hopefully Congress will never do it again. But that's how it would have to happen, Michael. I'm holding my breath and hoping that we don't ever get to that. But it looks to me like the Republicans are trying to set this up by refusing to pass legislation that would give enough money to the states that they could all start doing mail-in ballots. Michael, thank you for the call. Brian in Portland, Oregon. Hey, Brian, what's up?
Hey, Tom, thanks for having me on and everything you do. Just wanted to talk a little bit about Elizabeth Warren and Joe Biden and mostly all the other Democratic candidates that have left for their bid for presidency. We look to them for leadership and guidance, and a lot of them had plans, including Warren, yet they are nowhere to be found. This slush fund that's being handed out to Wall Street is ridiculous. I can barely even hold my temper at the things that are happening. We become crumb catchers, and they're going to turn us into purse snatchers, and that's basically what's happening right now.
That's what happens when you elect a Republican president or Republican Senate. I mean, that's what happens, Brian, and America's learning that lesson.
Exactly. The Republicans, you have your answer as to why they now have the Baphomet star. It's as simple as not being satanic or spiritual in that sense, but it's really about do what thou wantst and thou wilt. And so they just want to do what they want. And basically, greed, everything is a fire sale right now. And we are being sold out. And just try and square Pocan's comments with Professor Wolff's. They're completely different. Professor Wolff, he is an esteemed economist, and he knows exactly what he's talking about. This is a gutting
But he wasn't saying don't vote
economy.
for that bill. What he was saying was this legislation is a piece of crap, and I get that, Brian. Brian, I'm not, I'm just not going to spend the whole show defending, this piece of legislation. I'm very ambivalent about it myself, but I'm not going to condemn any Democrats who vote for it because it gets money to American people. John in Minneapolis. Hey, John, what's on your mind?
Yeah, I just wanted to say history does repeat itself, and Boris Johnson will probably receive lots of copies of Charles Dickens' Christmas Carol. And, you could almost redo that. I think somebody probably is already working on that with him as the lead character because, that kind of attitude has been with capitalism all along. It is, die and decrease the excess population. Thank you again. It's a very harsh Milton Friedman, Ayn Randian kind of idea, but, I guess it works for them. What can you say? Yeah. Also now,
well, it's the rationalization that very, very rich people and large corporations use to justify screwing average Americans and poor people. It's just a rationalization. Yep. I mean, it's a rationalization sold as a philosophy, but as a philosophy, It's BS.
Yes. And, the thing is, it doesn't have to be that way. We all realize that companies have to make money, but, there is a way to make money and also respect life.
Yes. Yeah. Amen. John, thank you. Very, very well said, as always. Michael in Redding, California. Hey, Michael, what's on your mind? Thanks for watching us on YouTube. What's up?
Yeah, no problem. Hey, Tom. I had a suggestion for Trump and Dan Patrick and CEOs, billionaires, and the 1%ers who feel that older people should sacrifice their lives for the economy. I really feel that they should put their money where their mouth is and sacrifice their personal wealth if they're that concerned about the economy.
Right. Yeah. Give up some of your cash. That's an excellent point, Michael. Thank you. Very well said. Roy in Chicago. Hey, Roy, what's on your mind?
Good afternoon. My thing is about a gentleman who talked about the movement of the drug industry from U.S. proper to Puerto Rico and then to India and China, and then having the drug companies keep the same level of price level, but yet the profits go up. And then this is all about the concentration of wealth, as written in the 21st Century Capital by a French author. Concentration of wealth is getting to be horrendous.
Yeah, you're talking about Thomas Piketty's book.
Yes.
Piketty's book.
So my answer for you is, with Amazon having $137 billion profit, besides local property taxes that they pay, what about on a federal level? Nothing?
Yeah, they paid no income taxes last year.
That was nicely arranged in the 1990s, right?
Cut. Say that again?
Yeah. That was all arranged in the 1990s with the development of the internet and all that?
Well, they're operating on a structure, the internet, that was publicly funded. It was developed by DARPA, and in fact, it was originally called DARPANet. It was, it was paid for with our dollars, but they're not paying any fee for the use of it or anything like that. There's really no mechanism to extract that. I think the question, for a debate to be had after this crisis passes is, how big is too big, and at what point do you break up Amazon, or say that if they are going to, if any company is going to do what Amazon is doing, they have to stick to one particular vertical line of products, for example. You can, because they have both vertical integration and horizontal integration. And that used to be a violation of the antitrust laws. It used to be, you can't, in fact, both kinds of integration were illegal. You couldn't be the movie company that makes the movie and then also be the company that owns the theaters. That was actually a law that was passed during World War II and produced a lot of innovation. You can't be the television networks that carry the shows and be the companies and own the companies that produce those shows. That law went into effect in the 1970s. And it opened up, Mary Tyler Moore was the first person to really use that well with MTM Productions. And she started producing all these shows for evening TV that were spectacular. She was not owned by one of the television networks. So Congress banned vertical integration. The courts have said, well, it's okay now. And then horizontal integration, the same thing. You can't have one company own every single gas station in an entire state, for example. Amazon is practicing both those things. They're now, if you go on Amazon and you search for batteries, they will show you Rayovac, but they'll also show you Amazon brand batteries. So they're vertically integrating by product category, and then they're horizontally integrated across product categories. And I think both of those things combined have given them this enormous market power, and it needs to be reevaluated. Roy, thanks a lot for the call. I got to move along here. John in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Hey, John, thanks for listening to KTRC. What's up?
Hey, Tom. I just wanted to encourage your listeners to check out Worldometer or Worldometer, WORLD-ometer, and it has good graphs that show you actually how it's going logarithmic. The United States has not gone vertical on that, but the world, the world graph of total cases, it's totally vertical. We're going to see a lot more cases. If you check it out, it'll give you a visual instead of just a bunch of numbers in your head.
Yeah, and there's one that from Johns Hopkins as well. And this is where it gets really concerning. This is from Agence France Presse, AFP, out of Paris. COVID-19 could lead to more than 80,000 deaths in the United States and overwhelm hospital capacity nationally as soon as early April, even if social distancing measures are respected, according to new research released Thursday today. The U.S. death toll has already soared past 1,000, and they're saying, with 68,000 confirmed infections, and they're saying it could be 80,000 deaths. There are other studies suggesting, and that's just, within the next month or so, there are other studies suggesting that it could be several million American deaths. Trump has just done so much damage to this nation by refusing to pay attention to the lessons from the Obama administration, because it was the Obama administration, and God forbid, and by lying to us for several months. In fact, the networks, CNN, MSNBC, there's an article in the Daily Beast today saying that they're seriously considering no longer carrying Trump's afternoon, and thank you, John, for the call, Trump's afternoon press conferences where he's talking about the coronavirus, because there's so many lies in them, and they can't do real-time fact-checking. And so, one of the producers said, well, maybe we'll just carry it until the first lie comes out and then we'll cut away. And another producer is saying, well, why don't we Why don't we just take clips from it and build it into kind of a newscast an hour later so we can just take out the stuff that's
You're
true?
listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
But the bottom line is people tune into these Trump press conferences in the afternoon thinking that they're desperate for information, and then he lies through his teeth at them and uses it to bash Democrats in the media. And welcome back. Melissa in Seattle. Hey, Melissa, what's up?
Hi, Tom. Thanks for taking my call. I wanted to touch base and elaborate on a caller who was also from Seattle, Washington yesterday, and he was talking about PPE, protective,
personal protective equipment, yeah.
Exactly. Thank you very much. And more specifically, masks. So what I am getting from people here is, and I'm not sure where this started, but me and you, ordinary people, going online and buying up all these masks and hoarding them for ourselves. Now, I find that to be ridiculous. Like, that's just not the case. So we're getting a lot of backlash, just regular people who aren't in the healthcare industry, from wearing masks out in public. We're literally being shamed. Because, okay, I want to protect myself because, like the caller said yesterday, we don't know who has it. There's no testing. So everybody
plus
literally
by wearing the mask,
wearing.
you're protecting people around you, too, in the event that you are infected and don't realize it. Yeah.
Precisely. And then going back to what you were saying with Malcolm X about the oppressed, I want to know, when are the oppressed going to stop blaming the oppressed and start blaming the oppressors? Because it's just, a man in a suit yelling at my girlfriend for giving a homeless man money. What is that? Why? It's just sad, and it's very disheartening. And I hope that we can start really pointing the finger at who is truly to blame for these economic issues. Because it's certainly not my fault, and it's certainly not your fault why there's not enough masks for the healthcare workers. I mean, God bless them all. They are our heroes, and I give them the utmost respect. But for a healthcare worker to get angry at an ordinary person who maybe is not in that field wearing a mask, come on. That's got to stop.
I get it, Melissa. And if you've got a half a dozen masks at home, that's a whole different thing from somebody who has hoarded, thousands of them, which apparently some of these big wholesalers, they're hoarding tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, and maybe even millions of them. And that's where it's really, really wrong. Melissa, thank you for the call. Eric in Erie, Pennsylvania. Hey, Eric, what's on your mind?
Hey, good afternoon, Tom. Thanks for taking my call. I'd like to offer kind of a public service announcement to everybody out there, particularly in the more rural areas. As a transplanted New Yorker into Erie, Pennsylvania, I'm not real happy with the place, but I thought this pandemic situation is the one time I could be grateful for it because of my semi-isolation and case density, and it's pretty provincial, not a lot of travelers here. And our case numbers were low. And our first case got announced maybe 15, 18 days ago, and it soon after came out that case number one had traveled in with it from a hot zone and was tested pretty immediately. And the doctor apparently did not give self-quarantine instructions for the 5 days of the test result. And this individual went out into the community. And 10 days later, we now have 5 confirmed cases in Erie County, Pennsylvania. But cases number 3 and 4 are directly linked to 1. And they're now thinking it's a public business that sells and services and deals with a lot of customers. So 1, 3, and 4 are in this locus that I think we're about to explode.
I get it, Eric. So pay attention to your local public health officials and your local news as well as the national stuff. Eric, thank you. We'll be right back. Hey, did you know that Hillary Clinton actually won Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, North Carolina, and Florida in the 2016 election? It's on page 92 of my new book, The Hidden History of the War on Voting. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and cheap batteries are very unpredictable. They say they're wonderful, and then they're not. But anyway, welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and I'll be picking up your phone calls here in just a second. Hollowed out Trump administration was not ready, and now it's shopping for medical supplies on Amazon. Honest to God, this is the Department of Homeland Security. At the Department of Homeland Security, there are 75 top jobs vacant or acting. At the Defense Department, it's 21 of the top 60 civilian positions. At the Department of Veterans Affairs, does not have a second in command or a head of emergency preparedness. The IRS is seriously understaffed. But here's where it gets bizarre. At the Department of Veterans Affairs, workers are scrambling to order medical supplies on Amazon after the department's leaders lacking experience in disaster response, because of course Trump hired lobbyists and fools, Republicans, failed to prepare for the onslaught of patients at the veterans medical centers. The Veterans Administration is literally going online to Amazon to try to buy stuff for this pandemic. I mean, that's how bad it is. Lisa in Niles, Ohio. Hey, Lisa, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. 2 quick points, if I could. Number one, I'd like to push back about Elizabeth Warren and her input onto these bills. In my opinion, I saw her points laid out specifically on Twitter. She has had a lot of pushback on that slush fund, and in my opinion, if not for her, we might not have any oversight at all.
You're absolutely right. Elizabeth Warren was one of the major forces in the Senate in making this bill better. Both her and Bernie Sanders. They applied a lot of pressure to the Democratic leadership.
I agree. The second point, I worked 17 years as a nurse. Our healthcare workers, they are human. What's happening is they have the brunt of keeping up the health of the country. They have no federal support. They have limited supplies, and you're starting to see the flawed humanity coming out. They can only take so much. And if we don't give them support, Tom, what's going to happen when they lose their stamina, when they lose their will?
And across
we need
the
to
country,
support them in every way.
Yes,
that's what I'm saying.
Absolutely do. We absolutely do, Lisa. Yep, I'm with you. Lisa, thank you. It's very well said. Joe in Brooklyn, New York. Hey, Joe, what's on your mind?
Hey, I wanted to know, could the world be involved in a civilization recess? It's very interesting how we are well prepared to work remotely, and the media is now asking if companies will have people working from home moving forward.
Right. It's possible, Joe, and I think that there are a number of probably permanent cultural changes that are going to come out of this virus. Even if we develop herd immunity and or a vaccine or both over the next 12, 18 months, something like that, I think that there's going to be a lot of changes and probably a lot of actually very good changes that are going to come out of this. The sad thing is that it's going to come at the cost of probably millions of people around the world dying, and perhaps even millions of people in the United States. I mean, that's how bad it could get. But yeah, I said the other day, I think that a lot of companies, Jared Kushner bought that giant office building in New York. Probably, 10, 20, 30% of the people of the companies that have offices there felt like they had to have an office. But they're discovering that they don't need to have an office. I think that you're going to see office rents going down because people are figuring out, hey, or employers are figuring out my people can work from home. And, so we're going to see more of that. Also, if you go back and look at one of the major cultural turning points in European history, it was right after the Black Plague in Europe, and I think it was in the 1320s or the 1340s, whenever it was. The generation after the Black Plague killed off a third of Europe. Now, this is nothing close to that. This is killing off, between 1% and 4% of infected people. Half to 1% of the population. But after the Black Plague did that, that brought the Renaissance. It totally changed Europe. It changed the business profile. It changed the cultural profile. Joe, I got to run, but thank you for the call. Melody in Parkville, Maryland. Hey, Melody, thanks for watching us on YouTube.
Hey,
what's on your mind?
Tom. Thanks for having me.
Sure. What's up? We only have a minute left here, Melody.
With respect to killing old people and able to help the economy, My thought is that if enough people in Congress die, enough older folks, and there are plenty of them to go around, it's not going to be conservatives replacing them. We have a younger society that is not afraid of socialism, and I could see that kicking them in the butt really fast.
Yeah, so what you're saying is if the Republicans take their own advice and get themselves infected and die for the economy, that it might not work out quite like they think. Yeah, I get it. Melody, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one. Thank you, Melody. Chris in Running Springs, California. Hey, Chris, thanks for listening to Sirius XM. We have just a minute to go, even a little less than that. What's up?
All right, Tom, real quick. Mail-in ballots, how difficult a procedure is that statewide? How costly is it? It sounded to me like it wasn't a ton of money, but they were making a big deal about it in this bill.
Right. Ron Wyden calculated the cost nationwide to be $500 million. There's already 6 states that pretty much do entirely vote by mail. Here in Oregon, the Washington State north of us, there's literally no place to go to vote. You have to vote by mail. If we were to do that, $500 million, and Ron Wyden and Earl Blumenauer put forward legislation that would provide that money to the states. The problem is you've got 17 states where you need a doctor's slip or an excuse in order to get a mail-in ballot. And so those states would have to change their rules, or the federal government would have to override them. And that's what everybody's working toward. We do not want to postpone these elections. The will of the people needs to be heard now more than ever before. But the only way it can safely be heard is by mail. And these red states that are fighting this, I think that they're hoping that they can use this crisis to mess with our elections, frankly. I mean, this is the only way Republicans can stay in power, is by fraud, as we've discussed many times. So anyway, thank you so much for being with us today. We will be back tomorrow, same bat time, same bat place. In the meantime, don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. Get out there, get active, tag you're it. Don't get out there, but you know what I'm talking about. Share things with your friends via email.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.